Chapter 139. What? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It seemed that Moses Adams was a person who understood people's hearts very well. To put it bluntly, Jiang Hai was a person with a tough mouth but a soft heart. In fact, more often than not, as long as he gave in and paid a price, he could get away with it. After all, he was just a nouveau riche, not a noble who valued face more than anything else. Now that he heard that Moses Adams had brought him something, he looked at it curiously. Here. Seeing Jiang Hai's expression, Moses Adams also showed a kind smile. He knew that he had passed this time. Then he handed Jiang Hai an envelope. Jiang Hai took the envelope and glanced at it. He knew what was inside. It should be the tickets for the 2015 NBA All-Star Game because the outside of the envelope was printed with the promotional poster for the 2015 NBA All-Star Game. Although he already guessed what was inside, Jiang Hai was still very happy to open the envelope. After opening the envelope, he found a magnetic card inside. This is the NBA All-Star Game ticket package. It includes the open practice for the All-Star Game on the 13th, the Masters Game and Rookie Challenge on the 14th, the All-Star Weekend Challenge on the 15th, the Development League All-Star Game on the 16th, the concert before the All-Star Game, and all the tickets for the All-Star Game. My seat is in the first row of the Eastern All-Star Game. If it wasn't held in New York this time, I wouldn't have been able to get such a good seat, but it really took a lot of effort to get it. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai curled his lips. He knew that Moya Adams was exaggerating, but he really liked this thing. I won't pretend that yesterday didn't happen. Next time, Mr. Adams, if I can't find you and have to wait 23 hours before I see you, then you can say goodbye to my dollar forever. Although this gift was very thoughtful, Jiang Hai still decided to give him a warning and let him know that he was not a pushover. That's what I should do. It was my mistake this time. Moses Adams quickly nodded when he heard that Jiang Hai had decided to turn the page. Sometimes, it wasn't a big deal to admit a mistake. After all, nobody would make life difficult for a green dollar. Tell me about this incident. Leaning back on the sofa, Jiang Hai asked Moses Adams. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams slowly said, this time, to be honest, you won't get any benefits, because these people really don't have anything. The nature of this incident was determined very quickly. It was very clear that Jiang Hai had been attacked. The police had indeed found Clive's wallet on the thief's body, and they had also found the fingerprints of these people on the switchblade on the floor. Moreover, it wasn't the first time these people had done something like this. Although they were really pitiful, as Jiang Hai said, this wasn't the reason for their crimes. These people were basically people with physical disabilities. America's society was essentially a capitalist society. Therefore, although there were some welfare organizations that would accept such people, their lives in the welfare organizations were not very good. After all, it cost a lot of money to raise a person, and everything in a capitalist society required money. Even the air they breathed had to be taxed. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if their lives were good. So, from a young age, they learned the law of the jungle in the welfare agency. The stronger, the more ruthless, they could eat more. The thin and weak, if they didn't do anything, they couldn't even fill their stomachs. Moreover, the most important thing was that the welfare agency couldn't take care of them for a lifetime. When they reached adulthood, the welfare agency would ask them to do some things, and they would accept the food and accommodation provided by the welfare agency in return. Many people couldn't accept this, and they were more willing to leave the welfare agency. But when they were young, they put more energy into how to fill their stomachs. In addition to their congenital deficiencies, it was difficult for them to find a job after entering society, and they didn't have a clear position. Over time, in these big cities, they were led astray by society and formed their own culture. When the men grew up, they became thieves and robbers. Of course, their main business was pimping. When the women grew up, they had no other choice but to sell their bodies to make a living. Speaking of which, this was a group of pitiful people. Even Jiang Hai felt quite uncomfortable when he heard it. He felt like he wasn't a good person, but when this feeling rose, Jiang Hai shook his head. What kind of Virgin Mary plot was the most unacceptable? Forget it, I won't sue them. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai shook his head and let these guys go. My boss is really a kind guy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moshe Adams also said with a smile. Well, some people with criminal cases will be locked up, and some who didn't commit any crimes will be educated in the police station for a few days at most, and then sent back to the welfare agency. They may also be dismissed on the spot. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moshe Adams thought for a while. According to the local laws of Boston, the situation was basically like this. After listening to Moshe Adams's words, Jiang Hai asked carefully. This time, a total of 36 people were caught in the den. 13 of the men, the 13 people who were killed by Jiang Hai, had crimes on them. Robbery, car theft, they all had criminal records. This time, they were in prison. It was estimated that they wouldn't be able to come out for a few years. There were also 23 women. Basically, they would not be punished too severely. It was the same as the law in Wuxia. Being a special service person did not constitute a crime. After the general den in China was raided, except for the organizer who would be sentenced, the people below would not be sentenced. At most, they would be locked up for 15 days and pay a fine of 5,000 yuan. The situation in the United States was similar. At most, they would be dismissed from the state. If you want to do it, you can go to other states to do it. After all, there were many states in the United States that were very open to this kind of thing and had licenses. However, after Jiang Hai heard this, he was a little uncomfortable. It was not that he thought the punishment was light. It was because he felt that if these people were released, they would probably do what they originally did. After all, they had no other way to survive. Those men dared to attack him, so he just ignored them. However, those women were a little pitiful. He remembered how bad the environment was after he chased them to the alley yesterday. Those women's eyes were so numb and lifeless when they looked at him. If he didn't know about this, it would be just that. But now that he knew, he still felt a little sorry if he didn't do anything. But what can he do? He didn't know himself, but fortunately, there were still 15 days to think about it. Those women are going to be locked up for 15 days, right? Looking at Moses Adams, Jiang Hai asked him. 21 of them are, but there are 2 twin sisters. They may not be, because the elder sister is the one who stole your wallet. It seems that there are no other cases except for this case. The younger sister has no criminal record, so the police are now waiting for your answer. If you want to pursue the matter, you will arrest the elder sister. If you don't pursue the matter, they may be released directly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams thought for a moment and said, Sisters? Let's go and have a look. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's brows couldn't help but raise. He didn't expect that the thief he caught yesterday turned out to be a girl. Thinking about how he felt when he searched the wallet yesterday, but the girl was really too thin, almost like a bag of bones. Jiang Hai almost searched her upper body, but he didn't find that she was a woman. Suddenly, Jiang Hai wanted to see these people, because he still couldn't make up his mind about what to do. Okay. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams on the other side immediately responded. After Jiang Hai changed his clothes and suppressed the fishy smell, the two drove into the city of Boston, one in front and one behind. Soon they came to the police station where Jiang Hai came yesterday. Originally, he was very reluctant to come back, but now he had something on his mind, so he didn't think much and went straight in. Fortunately, the police here still remembered him. After hearing Moses Adams explain Jiang Hai's intention, they took Jiang Hai to the small cell in the police station. Although this was not a detention center, after all, the prisoners were caught in the police station. It was impossible to let the prisoners run around in the police station, especially a large number of prisoners. They still needed a place to temporarily hold them, and it was such a small cell. However, this small cell was much better than the cells in the prison. At least, they would not be treated unfairly. When Jiang Hai walked in, 3 of the 6 cells were full. One of them was holding the 13 people defeated by Jiang Hai yesterday. Some of them needed treatment and were still in the hospital. The rest didn't need treatment or had already been treated. When Jiang Hai came in, these people raised their heads and looked at Jiang Hai. But at this time, there was only resentment and a strong murderous intent in their eyes. After all, it was because of this man that they didn't get the money, were caught, and were beaten. If eyes could kill, Jiang Hai would have died thousands of times. Originally, Jiang Hai still had some pity for these people, but when he saw the eyes of these men, Jiang Hai's heart calmed down. He knew that these people were no different from normal prisoners. Maybe their starting point was different, but the result was the same. Even if he used his connections to release these people now, these people would not be grateful in their hearts. Instead, they would look for opportunities to retaliate against him, or go out and resume their old business, causing more innocent people to suffer. They were not wronged at all. Chapter 140. Clang. Just as Jiang Hai walked past the male prisoner's cell, a girl suddenly jumped out of another cell next to it. The girl's hands slammed heavily on the iron bars of the cell. The loud noise also attracted Jiang Hai's attention. The girl looked about 1.6 meters tall, with short brown hair and a small face, about the size of a palm. Her light blue eyes were very beautiful, but from the shape of her face, it could be seen that she was too thin. At the same time, the clothes she was wearing were also somewhat familiar to Jiang Hai. If there was no accident, this girl should be the thief he caught. After seeing Jiang Hai looking over, the girl quickly used her hands to say something to Jiang Hai. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't learn sign language, so he didn't know what the girl was saying. I don't understand what you mean. Seeing the girl getting more and more excited, Jiang Hai said helplessly. She said that she knows she was wrong. She is willing to atone for her mistakes, but please save her sister. She didn't do anything bad. At this time, the policeman who led Jiang Hai and the others in said slowly. You can read sign language? Hearing the policeman's words, Jiang Hai asked him strangely. I used to be a volunteer. Seeing Jiang Hai so surprised, the fat policeman shrugged and said softly. Hearing the fat policeman's words, Jiang Hai turned his head and looked at the 2 cells in front of him. In these 2 cells, the girls were imprisoned. Different from the original alley, their clothes were cleaner. On each of their delicate faces, there was a pale and numb expression. Except for this girl and a girl standing not far behind her, who looked very similar to her, no one had any emotional fluctuations because of Jiang Hai's arrival. Perhaps for them, being alive might be more liberating than being dead, but human nature made them still struggle to live in this evil world. Jiang Hai was just one of the passers-by in their lives and didn't mean anything. Sigh, I originally didn't want to do anything to you. Those fellows deserve to be punished. As for you, you are all pitiful people. I came back this time to ask you, what are your plans after you come out? Seeing the expressions on these people's faces, Jiang Hai felt as if his heart had been punched. What kind of experience did they have to go through to have such despair? Jiang Hai used to think that when his parents left, he was the loneliest and most pitiful person in the world, but suddenly, he found that his most difficult days seemed to be far from the daily lives of these people. Although he was not a saint, at this moment, he hesitated and scratched his head. It seemed that he was regarded as a villain. However, it didn't matter if he was a villain, as long as he didn't do anything that made him unhappy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl, who was still gesturing quickly, couldn't help but stop for a moment. Then, she looked at Jiang Hai with some hesitation. Future? For them, the word future was illusory and unrealistic. How could they be qualified to talk about the future? Because they didn't know what would happen today. Would they starve to death? Would they be killed by others? Towards this world, this society, now, they had almost fallen into despair. Perhaps their lives would be like this, day by day. They would be locked up here for 15 days, and then when they were released, they would go back to their old jobs. After all, this was the only thing they knew. Now that they heard Jiang Hai's words, the girls here were a little confused. Listen, if I want to help you, then do you want to go back to the orphanage, find a job, or don't need me to care about you? Looking at the women in front of him, to be exact, they were girls because these women were not very old. Jiang Hai had read their information before coming in. Among these women, the oldest was only 22 years old, but she had already lived there for 6 years. That kind of environment would have a great impact on people's lifespan. The oldest in this group was the leader of the 13 men. He was also a deaf and mute person. He was 31 years old this year. Although he wasn't very old, he had already lived in that place for 17 years. Before these people, there were many groups of people in that place, but it was very difficult for them to live past 25 years old. Among these women, the oldest was 22 years old, and the youngest was only 14 years old. They were the twins. Maybe it was because the twin sister was a thief, or maybe it was because they were still young, so they hadn't sold their bodies yet. However, this was only temporary. In a few years, they would also follow this old path. Now that they suddenly heard Jiang Hai's words, the people here were stunned. Many of them couldn't help but raise their heads and look at Jiang Hai. They wanted to know whether Jiang Hai was telling the truth or not. This could be seen from their eyes. Boss, are you serious? When these women raised their heads and looked at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams, who was behind Jiang Hai, also stood up and asked hesitantly. After all, these women's identities were not so clean. Well, I'm serious. In my manor, there is a winery that will start planting grapes this year. I think they will be good winemakers. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai shrugged. Originally, he didn't decide whether to help these people or not, but when he saw the numbness of these people, he decided to lend a helping hand. If that's the case, I won't say much. Boss, although I'm very grateful to you, it's easy to hire them, but it's not so easy to change them. But there is also an advantage, which is that they can help you avoid taxes. Hearing that Jiang Hai even arranged a place for them, Moses Adams couldn't help but hesitate for a moment, then sighed and said, "It's not easy to change them, it's quite troublesome. One must know that these women's identities are very special. Ordinary manors want to hire them only to avoid taxes, and hiring 1 or 2 is enough. But how many does Jiang Hai want to hire?" He believed that if Jiang Hai said this sentence, at least 10 of these women would be willing to work. 10 deaf and mute girls, and deaf and mute girls who used to be professional women. By then, it would be more than just a little troublesome. It's estimated that those welfare agencies and the like would run to Jiang Hai every 2 or 3 days. To see if they were abused, to see if they were not allowed to eat well, to dress well, to see if the work was heavy, to see if they were discriminated against, to see if they would make some unreasonable requests, etc. When these people were about to starve, no one was willing to pay attention to them, but when someone stretched out a helping hand, there were often some defenders who would stand up and nitpick at the bones in an egg. I don't care about that. I just want to help you. Let me tell you, although this matter is more or less related to you, I don't want to mention it again. Now, I'll help to provide a position in the winery. I'm not very clear about the specific work, because I don't know how to make wine, but I guess you'll just have to take care of the grapes and pick them after the season. I won't give you a small amount of money because of your relationship with the people outside. Money is equal to the people outside. Food, accommodation, and food will be beef and fish, because there are also cattle and fish in my manor. The place you will live in will be a standalone villa, but you may need to squeeze in and sleep in the villa. If you don't want to, and want to go back to the orphanage, I will ask someone to send you back. If you don't need my help, I can also bail you out, but once you're out of the door, it has nothing to do with me. Looking at these women in front of him, Jiang Hai said seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, some people who were still doubtful, or even completely numb, suddenly became interested in Jiang Hai's proposal. Of course, there were still many people who were still numb, such as the oldest woman. At this time, she was still looking at the roof, without a trace of anger. If it weren't for the fact that her chest was still moving up and down, proving that she was still alive, she would be no different from a corpse. Obviously, this woman had no hope for life at this time. This was not something that Jiang Hai could change with a few words. Alright, let's bail them all out. The words that needed to be said had been said, and Jiang Hai did not want to say any more nonsense. He had already done his duty. After getting up, he said to Moses Adams, "Let's go." In response to Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams shrugged, although he did not think that Jiang Hai had made a clear choice. But Jiang Hai was the boss, and he had the final say. These women did not have any criminal records, so they only needed to pay some money and they could leave. Although Jiang Hai lacked money, he did not lack this. The 23 women were sold for a total of $11,000. That was equivalent to $500 per person, and the twin sister who did not commit any crime did not need to pay. When all the formalities were done, Jiang Hai also left the police station with the 23 women. When they left, the 13 men on the other side kept reaching out, wanting to grab Jiang Hai or begging him to take them away. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not even look at them. After leaving the police station, 8 of the 23 women left alone. This was what Jiang Hai said. He would not restrict their freedom. They did not believe in Jiang Hai, and it could be said that they did not believe in this society and this world. So when they left, Jiang Hai did not try to persuade them to stay. This was not something that could be changed with just a few words. There were 15 women left, including the twins. Those under the age of 18 should go back to the orphanage. If you don't want to go back to your original orphanage, Adams will help them contact the orphanage in Boston. I will pay for the intermediate costs. Looking at the remaining 15 people, Jiang Hai hesitated and said. Chapter 141. As soon as they heard that they were going to be sent back to the orphanage, several of the remaining girls began to shake their heads immediately. Looking at their frightened faces, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What's going on? Unfortunately, he couldn't understand what the girls were gesturing, so after hesitating for a while, he went to the police station and caught the fat policeman. He asked him to act as a translator. After the policeman saw the girls' gestures, he explained to Jiang Hai. They said that they don't want to go back to the orphanage. They are not happy there. They don't have enough to eat every day. Who the hell, those damn orphanages? Under the policeman's explanation, Jiang Hai slowly understood. In fact, although it was called an orphanage, this thing was really not as beautiful as the movies and TV dramas. Although the orphanage was not for profit, they also needed to spend money. The food they ate was not grown by the wind. The water they used also needed money. The electricity they used also needed money. Quilts, beds, and other things also needed money. Even if the government had subsidies, it was just a drop in the bucket. Therefore, under such circumstances, the children in the orphanage were actually not very good. Some of the younger children were still fine. Other than reading the Bible every day and not having enough to eat, they basically did not need to do any physical work. As for what to eat, there was no need to think about it. Basically, the food they ate every day was mainly mud of various vegetables. It was good enough to not starve to death. The older children not only had to read the Bible every day, but also had to use their own hands to exchange for food because they ate more. It was natural for them to do odd jobs in the orphanage, so there was no need to say much about it. In addition, they also needed to make some small biscuits, small food, and so on. They went to the parking lots, squares, or outside their homes in the rich district to sell these things. The money they sold back did not belong to them, but they had to hand it over. At the same time, everyone had their own business target every month. If they didn't achieve it, although they wouldn't be punished, they would have to eat less and be locked up in a small dark room. It was a common occurrence. Normal welfare institutions were like this. Not to mention the abnormal welfare institute these children were staying in. In such a welfare institute, people were more violent and irritated. Otherwise, they would not be willing to leave a place where they could at least sleep. Now that they heard that Jiang Hai wanted to send them back, they quickly shook their heads. They didn't want to go back. I can't do anything if you don't want to go back. I can't hire underage people to come to my manor. It's against the law. Although Jiang Hai was not afraid of the law, it did not mean that he would take the initiative to break the law. No matter where he was, hiring child labor was going to jail. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls stopped and lowered their heads helplessly. Among the 15 girls, the oldest was 21 years old, and the youngest was the pair of 14-year-old twins. 8 of them were over 18 years old, and 7 of them were underage. 3 of them were 17 years old, 2 of them were 16 years old, and this pair of 14-year-old twins. How about this, you go back to the Welfare Institute first. When you are 18 years old, you can come to me again. I will definitely hire you. Looking at the girls' gloomy expressions, Jiang Hai scratched his head and promised the girls. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 5 older girls among the girls looked at each other, hesitated, and nodded weakly. Seeing that the girls agreed, Jiang Hai was relieved. He immediately called Adams to open a hotel nearby for the girls. Then he contacted the best orphanage in the Boston area. Tomorrow, the 7 girls will be sent to the orphanage. However, after entering the hotel, Jiang Hai booked a room for them and was about to leave. However, these girls would not let Jiang Hai leave. After all, their lives had just been rekindled with a glimmer of hope. If Jiang Hai left like this, what would they do? How would they know if Jiang Hai was lying to them? Looking at these girls who blocked his way and frantically said something in sign language, although Jiang Hai did not understand, he knew what they meant. In the end, Jiang Hai had no choice but to open a room in the hotel. Boss, I have to admit that you are a kind-hearted rich man. In fact, in my opinion, even if you are merciful, you can just give them some money. Because he still needs to call the Boston Welfare Institute tonight and sign a labor contract with Jiang Hai tomorrow. These girls are not ordinary people. The labor agreement they sign is not as simple as Robin's. These girls are still quite troublesome, especially when Jiang Hai hires so many girls at once. It is even more troublesome. Give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Hey, you don't understand. Do they lack money in that line of work? What they need now is not money, but they need to really integrate into this world and become a member of this society. What they need is respect and a job, not just some money that will be spent. Hey, you don't understand. Have you contacted the Welfare Institute? Hearing Moses Adams's words, Jiang Hai gave him a blank look and said with a serious face. Almost done. We have already contacted 3 families. They can accept 5 people, but there are still 2 people who are a bit troublesome. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams said with a serious face. Contact them even if it's troublesome. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai snorted. Why bother looking for a lawyer? With such a sentence, Jiang Hai went to his room first, and Moses Adams also smiled bitterly. If it weren't for Jiang Hai being a high-quality client, he wouldn't have served him. It's too troublesome. For the first time, he heard that a lawyer had to arrange a welfare institute for some orphans. He really didn't take him seriously as a lawyer. But considering that Jiang Hai gave him a lawyer's fee based on time, he sighed again. As long as Jiang Hai gives him money, even if he asks him to pay for him to find a special service person, he has to accompany him, right? So he just shook his head and entered another room opened by Jiang Hai. Because Jiang Hai wanted to save trouble, he booked a room on the first floor of the hotel. 15 girls plus 2 men, 1 room for each. He doesn't need this money. Anyway, it's just 1 night. It doesn't matter. After Jiang Hai entered the room, he sat on the sofa in the room, turned on the TV, and flipped through the hotel's TV program in boredom. For him, he actually didn't care much about the past of these girls, or the future, or what happened to them. The reason why he did this today was because he didn't want to waste time talking about it. At the same time, it was also because he really had a hidden heart. But what will happen in the future, he didn't want to think about it at the moment, and he wasn't prepared to think about it. If these girls don't work hard, then he will dismiss them without any hesitation. But others don't know. Jiang Hai's sixth sense tells him that these new girls will work hard. What happened later also confirmed Jiang Hai's conjecture. These girls really cherish the opportunity when they have it. Bang bang bang, just as Jiang Hai was thinking about it, there was a knock on the door. When Jiang Hai heard the knock on the door, he couldn't help but be stunned. Who would knock on his people in the middle of the night? Out of curiosity, he walked to the door and opened it. But when he opened it, he was stunned because the person who knocked on his door was none other than the 14-year-old sister, the girl who stole Shendy Clive's wallet. Oh, what's the matter? Looking at the girl in front of him, Jiang Hai looked at her strangely and asked. Ah. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl began to gesture. She also knew that Jiang Hai couldn't understand sign language, so her gestures were very slow. Sign language, in fact, is a kind of symbolic memory of movements. It is mainly based on association. After Jiang Hai looked at it a few times, he probably guessed it. The girl's words were, "Please don't let them leave." The them he was referring to, if nothing unexpected happened, should be her and her younger sister. Why don't you want to go to the Welfare Institute? Yes, the life there may not be good, but I contacted the best welfare institute here. It should be better than the one you stayed in before. I promise, as long as you are willing to come to my manor to work after you are 18 years old, I will hire you. Seeing the girl's gesture, Jiang Hai said seriously. But the girl shook her head after listening to Jiang Hai's words, and she kept gesturing just now, which also made Jiang Hai a little overwhelmed. Seeing the hesitant look on Jiang Hai's face, the girl seemed to have made up her mind. She took a step forward and stood in front of Jiang Hai's door. With a force of her hands, she directly took off the tattered cotton-padded clothes she was wearing outside. As soon as the cotton-padded clothes were taken off, Jiang Hai was shocked. This was because at this time, the girl was not wearing any other clothes. She was only wearing a pair of pants, but her upper body was bare. But unlike other women's bodies, Jiang Hai's reaction was different. In addition to surprise and fear, there was also a trace of pity. This was because although the girl was 10 years old, her body was almost undeveloped. From Jiang Hai's perspective, he could clearly see the ribs on her body. This girl was extremely thin. Put it on, what are you doing? Forcibly turning his head, Jiang Hai pulled up the girl's clothes again, but the girl kept on taking them off. Her eyes were fixed on Jiang Hai. She had made up her mind to use her body in exchange for the opportunity to stay. This time, Jiang Hai really did not know what to do. Boss, the last orphanage also replied. Boss, I'm disturbing you. At this time, Moses Adams, who was in the next room, also finished his phone call and walked over to report the news to Jiang Hai. But as soon as he walked over, he saw this scene. Don't say those useless things. It's like this. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai wanted to kick him to death. He glared at him and quickly explained. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams's face was also a little embarrassed. Mr. Jiang, I have no other choice. If you don't want to hire child labor, then you can only adopt them. Chapter 142. Adopt your ass. Which country's law allows a 27-year-old single man to adopt two 14-year-old deaf and mute girls? Hearing Moses Adams's words, Jiang Hai almost went berserk. If he had salt soda next to him, he would probably spray Moses Adams to death. What kind of idea is this, adopt? Not to mention whether he agrees or not, the law of the United States will not allow it. He now has some doubts about whether Moses Adams is a lawyer or not. Hearing Moses Adams's words, the girl, who thought it was impossible, couldn't help but raise her head, her eyes full of hope. But when Jiang Hai saw this glimmer of hope, he was a little speechless. If the truth is really as simple as he said, but the problem is, things are not as simple as he said. Jiang Hai doesn't believe that this guy doesn't know what he knows. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl's eyes showed a trace of frustration. She bit her lip gently and didn't speak. She just stared at Jiang Hai with her big eyes, hoping that this matter can still be turned around. No, Mr. Jiang, you got two things wrong. First, you are not single, you are already married. Second, you are a rich man. This may be a bit troublesome for others, but for you, it is not very troublesome. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams said with a smile, but looking at his smile, Jiang Hai wanted to beat him so much. I am single, I am divorced. Looking at Moses Adams, Jiang Hai said very clearly. No, you are not, well, even if you are divorced, why don't you go back first, and then inform the people from the welfare agency to come and deal with this matter? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams was about to say something, but he quickly shut up. He also knew that he said too much. Jiang Hai is obviously unwilling to adopt this pair of sisters, so he seems to have done something wrong with his good intentions. If it was before, he would have woken up long ago. But there is no other way, he hasn't slept for nearly 48 hours. Yesterday morning, he was still in Miami and only took a nap on the plane. Today, he has been running for Jiang Hai, a big client. Now his brain really can't keep up. If it doesn't work, I can only do this. Kid, you heard it. In fact, I am not qualified to let you stay, but if you really don't want to go to the welfare agency, then wait for the people from the welfare agency to come, then you can talk to them. Looking at the girl beside him, Jiang Hai said slowly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl hesitated for a moment. She knew that no matter what she did now, Jiang Hai would not change his mind. The only way to stay here is to find a way from the people from the welfare agency. Thinking of this, she nodded, then bowed to Jiang Hai and returned to her room. When she returned to her room, her sister had been waiting for her in the room for a long time. As soon as she saw her sister coming back, she immediately rushed over and began to gesture with her hand language. Unfortunately, she didn't get the information she wanted to know from her sister. Then, she pouted helplessly and sat back on the bed listlessly. They really didn't want to go back to the welfare agency. For them, living there was really similar to staying in prison. Not to mention freedom, it was difficult to even eat and not be bullied. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to escape from there. For them, the only thing they wanted now was to find a warm place where they could eat. Originally, Jiang Hai's place would be as beautiful as heaven, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't seem to let them go. Don't worry, I will find a way. Looking at her sister's sad look, a trace of reluctance flashed in the eyes of the older sister. Although they were born only a few minutes apart, she, as the older sister who came to the world first, must find a way to take care of her younger sister. Then, she began to gesture with her younger sister. You bastard, are you trying to kill me? Also, you said that I'm not divorced, what do you mean? I'm clearly divorced. After the girl left, Jiang Hai couldn't help but punch Moses Adams. He couldn't help but grimace, but he didn't complain or fight back. After all, he still wanted to keep Jiang Hai as a client, and most importantly, he did say something wrong just now. Sir, I just checked your information. You are registered to be married in Wuxia. Moses Adams said with a grin while rubbing his shoulder. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned. He couldn't figure it out. Sir, you're not an immigrant, but an investment green card, so the immigration office doesn't care if you're married or not. You can fill in whatever you want. Moses Adams shrugged, probably seeing Jiang Hai's doubts. Obviously, the people in the immigration office wouldn't say no to a client who wanted to invest hundreds of millions of dollars. They wouldn't say no to a client who wanted to invest hundreds of millions of dollars, let alone a non-immigrant. Even if it was a real immigrant, they wouldn't say much. Giving 2 nationalities in exchange for hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and also solving the problem of more than a dozen jobs. Most importantly, there was nothing more cost-effective than increasing local taxes. King U.S. Empress. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai cursed secretly. At the same time, he thought that he should have been divorced. After all, after the last phone call, he said so harshly. Chile wouldn't tolerate it anymore. But now, he wasn't divorced. What was going on? What is Chile going to do? Muttering in a low voice, Jiang Hai walked into the room with a suspicious attitude. As for Moses Adams, he breathed a sigh of relief. Jiang Hai didn't mention his mistake just now, so he escaped. But what does this guy mean? Does he want to keep the 2 girls or not? Looking at Jiang Hai's closed door, Moses Adams touched his chin helplessly because he really couldn't see through Jiang Hai. In fact, he wasn't the only one who couldn't see through Jiang Hai. Achoo. At this time, in the capital of Wuxia, on the top floor of a commercial office building in the CBD, Chile, who was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looking at the foggy capital at this time, couldn't help but sneeze. Then she rubbed her nose with some distress, walked to her desk, picked up the mink coat on the back of the chair, and put it on casually. She tightened her clothes, walked to the window again, and looked out of the window where she couldn't see anything. In fact, the prosperity of a country was inseparable from industrial development, and as long as industrial development was inseparable from pollution. At present, China had always been determined to develop a strong national strength, so it was inevitable that they didn't pay too much attention to environmental protection and the like. Jiang Hai still remembered that when he went to the capital when he was young, he could still see the blue sky. In his hometown, Ice City, the blue sky was also the main theme of life, but he didn't know when the haze began to become the main theme of this world. It was fine in summer, but in winter, after central heating began, it was difficult to see clearly in the northern land beyond 5 meters. It was only when it snowed occasionally that these dirty things could be seen clearly. To be honest, although such an environment caused a lot of trouble for people, the industrial development of a country was always inseparable from these things. What was called developing China? It was a country that had always been developing. What was called a developed country? It was a country that had stopped developing and reached a balance. If it continued to develop, there wouldn't be much effect. Only then would it be called a developed country. A few decades ago, the United States environment was even worse than China's. Sewage flowed everywhere, and the air pollution index was off the charts. But after World War II, they had always been the world's leader. Their development quickly left other countries behind by a few, or even dozens of streets. After they had enough advantages, they began to patiently manage it. The current environment in the United States wasn't as beautiful as a painting, but at least in terms of air quality, it was definitely much better than China's. It couldn't be compared to some deep mountains and forests. Just comparing the air quality in the cities was indeed much better than China's. And in some rural areas, the air quality was even better. Of course, this had nothing to do with Chile at this time. Although she stood in front of the window, she could only vaguely see the outline of some buildings in the distance. She stood here not to look at the scenery or to get some fresh air, but to think about something. She was thinking about this morning's call from her mother, asking her if she was going back for the new year. After all, it was already the middle of January. There was less than a month left before the new year. Whether she was going back for the new year was naturally the most important thing for every parent. Now, Chi Li's mother was the only one left. If she said that she didn't go back, she would feel uncomfortable in her heart. After all, it was the new year. She also hoped that she could stay at home. But if she wanted to go back, Jiang Hai was destined not to go back with her. How was she going to explain it? Tell the truth, or what? But how was she going to say this? It had been half a year since Jiang Hai left the country. In this half a year, she didn't know why, but she had been hiding the news that Jiang Hai was not in the country. But now that the new year was coming, she couldn't hide it anymore. What should she do? This damn guy really knows how to give me problems. Chi Li slammed the window in front of her hard. But unfortunately, no matter how hard she clenched her teeth, Jiang Hai couldn't hear her. President Chi, are you still going to the banquet tonight? At this moment, the office door opened a crack. Her assistant looked at Chi Li, who was in a bad mood, and asked carefully. Chi Li didn't answer. Instead, she turned around and left. Feelings were feelings, career was career. She was no longer the person who needed relationships to survive. Chapter 143. The next morning, Jiang Hai took the girls to the mall and bought them a new set of clothes. Although Jiang Hai was stingy with himself, not that he was stingy, but he really didn't like those upper-class clothes, he was quite generous to others. He bought everyone a new set of clothes, and none of them were cheap. The 15 girls who stayed cost Jiang Hai nearly $20,000, which was equivalent to more than $1,000 per person. This was something that the girls couldn't imagine in the past. As the saying goes, clothes make the man, and saddle makes the horse. You could tell at first glance that the clothes made the man. Although these girls had some congenital defects, when God closed a door for you, He would always open a window for you. Because these girls didn't have enough to eat all year round, and because they lived in a house, they were all quite thin. The fattest girl was no more than 50 kilograms. Their skin was especially white and tender. Most importantly, those men weren't blind. Since they wanted these girls to do that kind of service, they would definitely look for them. Therefore, when these girls changed into new clothes, they were definitely looking for very beautiful girls. Therefore, when these girls changed into new clothes, they were no longer in the same state as they were yesterday. If it weren't for the inferiority complex they had developed over the years, they would have been models on the catwalk if they had a more confident attitude. Looking at these girls, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stare. To be honest, among these girls, some of them didn't lose to Shite Clive in terms of looks. Of course, they didn't win either. Among these girls, the ones that attracted Jiang Hai's attention the most were the twins. After washing up, the two girls were really very beautiful. They had big blue eyes, white skin, and golden curly hair. Everything matched the characteristics of blonde beauties. However, they both had small palm-sized faces. Their facial features were delicate and pretty, but they also looked very cute. Especially after changing into the same clothes, even Jiang Hai was stunned. They were indeed a pair of perfect big Lolas. In particular, this pair of big Lolas kept looking at Jiang Hai with pitiful eyes. This made Jiang Hai a little unable to stand it. After changing into the clothes, Jiang Hai treated these people to a big meal. After the meal, the welfare institutions that he had contacted had already sent people to pick up the girls under the age of 18. Although these girls were very reluctant, compared to trusting Jiang Hai, perhaps returning to the welfare institution was a good way out. Especially after they learned that the new welfare institution that Jiang Hai found for them was indeed much better than the previous one, they were also a little tempted. And even if they were unhappy in the welfare institution, they still remembered Jiang Hai's words. When they reached adulthood, they could go to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai would definitely hire them. This was also their way out in the future. After these girls left, 8 of the remaining 10 girls first went to the nearby hospital with Jiang Hai to do a comprehensive physical examination. Since Jiang Hai wanted to hire them, he naturally needed to do a checkup. This was not him being narrow-minded, but he needed to know if his employees' bodies were suitable for employment. After all, they had worked in that kind of work before. Jiang Hai was very afraid that they would carry some untreatable germs. That would be troublesome. Fortunately, these women only had some ordinary trauma diseases in addition to extreme malnutrition and hypoglycemia. The imagined diseases did not exist. Then they went to the lawyer's building of the local welfare institution and signed a labor contract because the nature of their work was different from that of cowboys and fishermen. They did not have these survival skills, so Jiang Hai only let them do some casual work. Their main job was to plant grapes. When it was time to make wine, they naturally had to pick the grapes. Of course, under normal circumstances, they also needed to take care of the vegetables in the manor. Other miscellaneous work was also given to them. Of course, it was within their capabilities. For example, they regularly cleaned some weeds on the ground or cleaned the parking lot. For these jobs, they were still competent. After all, it did not require much skill, and it was not very tiring. Jiang Hai gave them $400 a week, which was $2,800 a year. Although it was not much, it was at least much less than their previous income. However, they gained dignity here. Most importantly, they did not need to spend anything. Jiang Hai took care of their food and accommodation. If they did not want to work, they could leave at any time. Jiang Hai would not stop them. Most importantly, the money they earned in the past wouldn't be in their hands. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to live in that place and dress like that. Do you think those 13 men are just decorations? Therefore, when they saw such an agreement, the remaining 8 girls quickly signed it. For them, being able to work in Jiang Hai's manor was like a new life for them. The other terms of the contract were similar. The only difference was that the welfare agency would come down to check on them from time to time. They would check to see if Jiang Hai had abused these special girls, or if something had happened that should not have happened. In the eyes of the welfare agency, although Jiang Hai helped them solve the problem of the 8 girls' jobs. But who knew if Jiang Hai had bad intentions? After all, these 8 girls were very beautiful. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only laugh. He had nothing else to say. After the 8 girls had signed the contract, Jiang Hai specifically called Robbins, who was still in the farm, and asked him and Philemon to drive the remaining 2 cars together. Otherwise, they really could not fit so many girls. After finishing the matter, Jiang Hai's 2 F-750 also appeared on the streets of Boston. Although there were many luxury cars on the streets of the United States, the sudden appearance of 3 super pickup trucks still attracted a lot of attention, especially these 10 girls. They originally thought that Jiang Hai's car yesterday was overbearing enough. But today, when they saw the F-750 that was bigger than the F-650, they were shocked again. Some of them carefully climbed into the car. Perhaps they were still afraid of Robbins and Philemon. They did not dare to sit in the front passenger seat but crowded in the back. Robbins and Philemon were also a little speechless about this. Do they look like bad people? Well, these 2 guys really don't look like good people. There were 6 people in the 2 750s, so there were 4 people left. Naturally, they squeezed into Jiang Hai's car. Fortunately, the car was very wide, and these girls were not fat, so they could still squeeze in. As for Jiang Hai's front passenger seat, the oldest girl among these girls sat there. In any case, they finally got all of them in. Then Jiang Hai, Robbins, and Philemon got up and brought the remaining 10 girls back to his manor. The 2 girls had not found a place yet, so they came back together. Jiang Hai made an appointment that the people from the Welfare Institute would come to pick up the 2 girls tonight. As for whether the 2 girls would leave or not, he really had no idea. As for Moses Adams, after watching Jiang Hai sign the contract with these girls, he left first. As for him, he did not run away, but went to contact the Welfare Institute. Although he was a little uncertain about Jiang Hai's situation. But since Jiang Hai said so, then he needed to do what Jiang Hai said literally. He couldn't really ignore these 2 girls, so he could only bring them back together first. Aphrodite, this is our manor. Not long after, Jiang Hai's motorcade had already seen his manor from afar. Pointing at the huge manor in front of them, Jiang Hai said to the girl beside him. Because he had signed the contract, Jiang Hai also knew the names of these 10 girls. The girl sitting beside him was called Aphrodite Arnold. She was a French girl, 21 years old this year, but was the oldest of these people. When Jiang Hai had asked who would stay, she had been the first to stand up. Although he didn't know her very well, Jiang Hai could tell that she had always been filled with a glimmer of hope for a new life, and Jiang Hai was the catalyst for her hope. It's beautiful. Looking at the snow-white manor in front of her, Aphrodite's big eyes sparkled as she gestured lightly. What's so beautiful about it now? It's all snow. It'll only be beautiful when spring comes. This is a green sea of grass, there's a slender beach road in the middle, and further east is a real ocean. That's what's beautiful. When I first came here, I was also a hothead. They asked for 280 million, so I bought it for 280 million. Now that I think about it, it's really a bit of a loss. Although Jiang Hai didn't know sign language, after a day of contact, he basically knew some things and explained to the girl. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite also laughed silently. At this moment, she looked like a 21-year-old girl. Aphrodite was full of hope for her new life, and among the 3 girls in the back row, only one of them had similar feelings. This girl was called Janice Joy, one of the people signed by Jiang Hai. She just happened to be 18 years old this year. Her skin wasn't particularly white, but was a very healthy wheat color. She had a head of long brown hair and single eyelids, but her eyes weren't small and were slender. She looked especially flirtatious, but her personality was also very naive. At this moment, she was also lying there, looking at the scenery outside. This was where she would be working in the future. As for the remaining twins, they were still thinking about it. However, on this day, Jiang Hai didn't completely gain nothing from them. At least he knew their names. The older sister was called Daliana Evelyn, and the younger sister was called Marian Evelyn. Through the understanding of the association, this pair of sisters were the only girls who had been abused in the orphanage. When they were 12 years old, the 2 sisters escaped from the orphanage and were later found by one of the 13 men. Originally, after a few years of recuperation, they would come out to work like the others. However, in order to not let her sister get hurt, Daliana learned how to steal. Every day, she stole some money to exchange for food. Just like that, 2 years passed. Chapter 144. Because there are indeed a lot of you, and I have to leave 2 rooms for the winemaker, you can only squeeze in for the time being. Jiang Hai returned to his manor with the girls. After parking the car, he took them into the residential area. Of course, when they walked in, they attracted the attention of the people in the manor. After all, they were young and beautiful. It would be strange if the men did not look at them. The fishermen and Philemon were fine, since they had families. If they looked at them too much, they would be punished. Robbins, Burkdaller, and Edward Anderson were old, so they just looked at them. However, Belle and Harriman were somewhat stunned. Even when the girls got off the car, the 2 of them took the initiative to help the girls carry the toiletries that Jiang Hai bought for them. This action startled the girls. They were still very vigilant towards others, so they didn't want Harriman and Belle to touch their things. They would rather carry it themselves. Zhao Hai nodded and said, all right, all right. Harriman and Belle were very hurt by this. Now, the only person these girls could trust was probably Jiang Hai. Although Jiang Hai did not show it on his face, he was actually very happy. After driving away Harriman and Belle, who wanted to flatter him, Jiang Hai took them to the back of the villa area. Then Jiang Hai arranged for them to live in 4 small villas in the residential area. There were 16 small villas in Jiang Hai's residential area, which were divided into 3 rows. The first row was Jiang Hai's big villa. Then, with Jiang Hai's villa as the starting point, there were 5 small villas in a row. The right side was directly connected to the cowshed. In the middle of each small villa, there was a space to ensure their private world. Then, there were 5 villas in the second row, and 6 villas in the third row. Now, 10 rooms were occupied: Robbins, Burkdaller, Philemon Turner, Harriman Fells, and Belle Lester. Each of them lived in a room in the first row. After all, they were the ones who chose the rooms first. The fishermen recruited by Jiang Hai, led by Edward Anderson, lived in the villas in the second row. Jiang Hai arranged 2 villas for the new girls, who lived in the third row. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't need so many people. After all, If it was replaced by some normal men, just taking care of the grapes, planting vegetables, doing odd jobs, and so on, 4 people wouldn't be enough. But who told him to pity these girls? It's not crowded, it's not crowded. Thank you, thank you. After hearing Jiang Hai's arrangement, Aphrodite and the others, who were originally standing behind Jiang Hai, immediately gestured. These villas all had more than 2 rooms. Not to mention individual rooms, even one room was excellent. They had been looking at Jiang Hai's villas just now. To be honest, Jiang Hai's villas were not worse than the villas in the suburbs where the rich lived in the Boston area. Even if they were not as rich as the rich, it would not be a problem for them to be comparable to ordinary white-collar workers. Because when Jiang Hai was decorating these small villas, he bought all the things that he needed to buy. The house had lights, beds, wardrobes, geothermal heat, electrical appliances, and so on. Although it could not be compared to Jiang Hai's main villa, it was still very luxurious and comfortable. Jiang Hai had already told them to turn on the geothermal heat in advance. Therefore, when the girls entered the small villa, the temperature had already reached 26 degrees Celsius. It was a very comfortable temperature, at least in the eyes of these girls. You don't have to be too polite with me. After all, you have to work here. If you have any problems in the future, you can come to my main villa to find me at any time. If you encounter any danger, there's a phone in the house. If it's not convenient for you, just press the button. Remember to lock the door. Although the people in my manor should be good people, you must be vigilant. Looking at the nervous girls in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and said, then continued to introduce them to each other. By the way, can you cook? Don't starve yourselves. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai suddenly asked the girls. Their identities were indeed a little special. It might not be good for them to eat in other people's houses. After all, they were different from him. And he did not have a professional cook here. If they did not know how to cook, it would be troublesome. No need, we all know how to cook. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite gestured. After all, they used to live in the orphanage, and the children in the orphanage, except for the very young ones, would be arranged to do some work when they grew a little older. For example, it was very normal for them to help in the kitchen. Therefore, their cooking skills were different. However, they would not starve to death. Seeing that they all knew how to cook, Jiang Hai was relieved. Then, he brought these girls to his house. Here, Jiang Hai introduced the pets that the girls gave him. In fact, they were mainly Little White and Little Yellow. This was to prevent the 2 from accidentally injuring them. When the girls saw the 2 pets, they were very scared, especially Delina and Marion. They had dealt with these dogs a lot in the past. After all, where they lived, there were a lot of stray dogs. And these stray dogs were a threat to these people for a long time. However, these 2 dogs were different from those ferocious dogs that would bare their teeth when they saw them. They were very obedient. When Jiang Hai was talking, they just sat there obediently and looked at the girls in front of them with their big eyes. After Jiang Hai's voice fell, they sniffed the girls and then left. After the 2 dogs left, the girls couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although they didn't know why, the 2 dogs gave them too much pressure. Seeing the girls relaxed, Jiang Hai didn't say much. This was also a test, a show of strength. But now, it seems that the effect was good. Then, Jiang Hai brought them to the warehouse. When Jiang Hai opened the warehouse, the girls were shocked. In Jiang Hai's cold storage, there was a lot of meat hanging. These were the meat that Luo Binsi and the others wanted to eat because their consumption was really high, especially after the 5 fishermen joined. So, every time they killed a cow, Luo Binsi and the others would give the best beef to Jiang Hai. The rest of the beef would be put in the cold storage. Whoever needs to eat it can come and get it, it's convenient. Jiang Hai's house had 3 cold storage, 1 for frozen meat, 1 for frozen fish, shrimp, and crabs, and 1 for storing vegetables. Of course, Jiang Hai also had a small warehouse in his villa, which was used to store the good things he liked to eat. In front of the surprised eyes of these girls, Jiang Hai opened the 3 warehouses. Seeing this, the girls' eyes widened even more. As long as you don't waste anything, you can eat as much as you want. As long as you can eat it, you can take it back to eat. You can choose to come and take some every day, or take more back. The place where you live also has a refrigerator, but the frozen food is not very delicious. Looking at the performance of the girls, Jiang Hai smiled. The expressions of these girls made him very satisfied. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls also calmed down. Before coming here, they had already arranged who would live with whom according to their close relationship. At this time, they also sent representatives of each family and walked into the cold storage. Compared to vegetables and seafood, they now prefer to eat meat. After all, the Boston area is close to the sea. The fishing here is abundant all year round, and the price of seafood is not high. As for vegetables, although the vegetables in the United States are also very expensive, the people in the United States don't eat this kind of thing. Compared to other foods, they prefer beef. At most, after taking a lot of beef, they take some vegetables to season it. Jiang Hai watched them take all the food and sent them back to the room where they lived. It's still winter in the next 2 months, so there's no way to grow grapes or vegetables. You should take care of your bodies first. You are too thin now. I want to raise some laborers, not models. Wait until March, when the harvest will start. When Jiang Hai left, the girls breathed a sigh of relief. Then, a happy smile appeared on their faces again. Although they had imagined what kind of place Jiang Hai's place would be, they didn't expect it. But they really didn't think that Jiang Hai's place would be so good. There was a warm, comfortable, spacious villa to live in, good beef, fish, shrimp, vegetables to eat, TV to watch, and even their own private space to receive a weekly salary. They didn't have to worry about anything, they didn't have to starve. Compared to where they used to live, this was heaven. After Jiang Hai left, the girls began to get busy. They checked their rooms, every brick, every tile, even the water meter, gas meter, and electricity meter. They carefully looked at it for a long time before they started to cook. Although the cooking wasn't delicious, for them, it was the best delicacy. They were full for the first time in many years. Lying on the big bed in the bedroom, many of them fell asleep as soon as they touched the pillow, even though the sun hadn't completely set at this time. As for the leader chosen by the girls, Aphrodite Arnold didn't fall asleep. Instead, she lay on the bed, blinking her big eyes and looking at the white ceiling above her. At this moment, her heart was filled with Jiang Hai. This man had rescued her from that dark world. Towards Jiang Hai, 90% of her heart was filled with gratitude, and the other 10% had some special feelings. At this moment, Jiang Hai didn't know about this. After settling the 8 girls down, Jiang Hai returned to the villa. Looking at the 2 girls in front of him who had yet to find a way out, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his teeth. I hope the people from the Welfare Institute will be able to persuade them. Chapter 145. You're here. Please come in. It turned out that whether it was at home or abroad, the effect of government agencies could be improved. Even with Moses Adams's face, 2 staff members from the Boston area's welfare agency came to Jiang Hai's manor when the sky was already a little dark. Under the guidance of Moses Adams, they came to the door of Jiang Hai's villa. After parking the car, a man and a woman got out of the car. Both of them were white. The girl looked like she was in her late 20s. She was very beautiful, but she was not particularly young. The wrinkles next to her nose were deep. She had white skin and brown hair. She looked very American. There was also a man who looked to be in his 30s. He was white. To be exact, in the Boston area, there were not many people of color because in the earliest days, this place was actually a disaster area for racial discrimination. But later, because this was also a metropolitan area and the academic center of the United States, under the intervention of the American government, this place became a key area to rectify discrimination. Today, although the majority of white people in the Boston area were of Irish descent, the discrimination against people of color was gradually disappearing. Except for some old people who still maintained their original views, people in their 30s and 40s had restrained their character. But obviously, this guy didn't seem to belong to this group, because when he saw Jiang Hai, he couldn't help but frown. Originally, he thought that since this manor was so big, the owner here would probably be a kind old white man, but he didn't expect it to be a yellow young man. This made him reduce Jiang Hai's score in his heart. Jiang Hai didn't care about this. They could see him as they liked, but they couldn't show it. Jiang Hai was quite a narrow-minded person. If these guys dared to show off in front of him, he would not let them go easily. Hello, my name is Kelly Marie. This is my colleague, Carlos Barron. We are here to pick up the girls. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman couldn't help but smile and greet him. The man nodded and then entered the room under Jiang Hai's signal. As soon as they entered the room, they saw the Evelyn sisters sitting on the sofa watching TV. When the sisters saw the two strangers coming in, they instantly became alert. Hello, my name is Kelly. You can call me Big Sister Kelly. I'm here to pick you up. Seeing the vigilance in the eyes of the two girls, the woman gestured as she walked in front of the two girls and looked at them. Unfortunately, even though she had a smile on her face, the two girls tried their best to shrink back, unwilling to get close to her. Seeing the vigilant look of the two girls, the woman also sighed. It seemed that it was not going to be easy. You don't have to be afraid. I don't mean any harm. You can't always stay in someone else's house. You will disturb him. Looking at the two girls, the woman continued to gesture. No, we won't leave. We want to stay here. We can work in exchange for food. Seeing the woman's gesture, the elder sister Daliana Evelyn's immediately followed. No, you can't. You are still too young. If he hires you, it will actually harm him. Do you understand? But before she finished her gesture, the woman had already interrupted her and said to them with a serious face. But after hearing her words, the two girls were still unmoved. They just shrank back, shook their heads, and waved their hands. They were unwilling to leave no matter what. The woman continued to persuade them, but the two girls were determined. Jiang Hai and the others stood there for half an hour. During this time, the woman tried to persuade them, but it was to no avail. The two girls were determined not to go with them. At this time, the man who was standing behind them couldn't bear it anymore. He walked in front of the woman and reached out to grab the two girls. At the same time, he said, Sister, you're not going to go with me. At the same time, he said, don't talk nonsense with them. Just take them away. These two girls are determined to stay here. You can't persuade them to leave. When his voice fell, the man had already grabbed the two girls' arms. The woman beside him, Kelly, was hesitating whether she should do this or not. But judging from the current situation, it seemed that she didn't have much choice. If they didn't take them away by force, they would probably return empty-handed today. These two girls had been malnourished for many years. Their bodies were so thin that they were almost like a layer of skin wrapped around bones. Being pulled off the sofa by this man, the younger sister, Marian Eveline, was almost scared out of her wits. She just struggled hard and didn't want to be pulled away by this man. On the other side, her elder sister, Daliana Eveline, was struggling hard. She even forcefully hit this man's arm. However, it was a pity that her strength wasn't enough to move this man. You. Seeing this guy's rude actions, Jiang Hai subconsciously became angry. He stepped forward to stop this scene, but just as he took a step forward, he was stopped by Moses Adams beside him. If you don't want them to stay, then you can only watch them leave. Moses Adams looked at Jiang Hai and said seriously. After all, at this moment, this man just pulled and didn't do anything else. If Jiang Hai made a sound now, it would be really troublesome. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stop. His eyes were a bit hesitant. He was born to be indecisive and didn't have his own opinion. Of course, once he decided on something, he would follow it to the end. But now, for him, these two girls were really troublesome. Moreover, he was not qualified to deal with them. "Ah, stinky girl, how dare you bite me?" While Jiang Hai was hesitating, Daliana had already rushed to the man's side. She knew that it was impossible for her to beat this man or pull off his hand with her own strength. Therefore, she used her strongest weapon, her mouth, to bite this man's arm. Under the pain, the man couldn't help loosening his grip on the two sisters. Looking at the blood on his arm, this man was also furious. Looking at Daliana, who was still stubbornly raising her head in front of him, this man didn't think too much. He raised his right hand and slapped towards Daliana's face. Looking at the approaching slap, Daliana was startled. She immediately closed her eyes and shrunk her head into her body. However, even so, she didn't step back. Instead, she still stood there tenaciously to show her determination. "Who?" The slap brought along a gust of wind towards her face, but after the gust of wind passed, she didn't feel any pain even after waiting for a long time. Daliana couldn't help but feel a little strange. When she opened her eyes, she discovered that the slap had stopped less than 5 centimeters away from her. The slap was still the same one, but on the man's wrist, there was a hand that wasn't very big, but firmly grasped there. The huge force caused the man's hand to continuously tremble, and his face was also flushed red from suffocation. Needless to say, the owner of this hand was obvious. The only person here who had the ability to block this attack was Jiang Hai. "Is this how you deal with these kids?" Looking at this man in front of him, Jiang Hai's voice was a bit cold. If it weren't for him today, this kid would have been beaten up. Looking at the two girls who were curled up like kittens in front of him, Jiang Hai's heart was burning with anger. F***ck off, yellow man, you're not a good person either. Since you've decided to send them to the welfare organization, they have nothing to do with you. Don't think that I don't know what you're planning to do by hiring so many deaf and mute girls." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man grinned and roared angrily. But fortunately, after he said the word yellow, he took back his words. Otherwise, Jiang Hai would have directly made him unable to speak the rest of his words. But now, what he said shocked Jiang Hai. In all honesty, when he brought these girls here, he really didn't have the slightest bit of dirty thoughts. He just pitied these girls and wanted to find a way out for them. However, this guy's words made Jiang Hai quite unhappy. At that time, Jiang Hai's hand gradually increased in strength. At the same time, Jiang Hai tried to break the guy's hand. But this guy couldn't break free from Jiang Hai's grip. Jiang Hai's expression changed. The huge pain made him a little confused. At that time, he kicked Jiang Hai without thinking, but Jiang Hai was faster. He kicked back and the man's leg was crooked. Then, the huge pain and the soreness in his leg made him kneel on the ground. Looking at Jiang Hai's murderous gaze, he had no other choice but to scream. "Please stop. Mr. Jiang, calm down." Seeing this scene, Kelly and Moses Adams on the other side immediately shouted at Jiang Hai. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai's original anger gradually subsided. When he let go of his hand, he kicked out. It happened to kick this guy in the chest and sent him flying. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't use all his strength, but the kick still made the man vomit on the ground for a long time. "Mister, don't you think you went a little overboard?" The woman immediately ran over and checked her colleague's injuries. Although he didn't suffer any internal injuries and didn't have any broken bones, it was obvious that Jiang Hai had taught him a lesson. Especially his right hand. At this time, Jiang Hai had pinched his wrist until it was purple and black. She estimated that it would take at least 10 days to half a month to recover. Although there was no fatal injury, it still made the woman very angry. She stood up and said to Jiang Hai, "Overboard? Why didn't you say anything when he was about to hit them? Or are you used to treating these girls like this?" Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and shouted at the woman. Chapter 146. You. Carlos is just in a hurry to take them away. Besides, isn't this the result you want? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman couldn't help but be speechless. But never use the word reason to measure a woman's mind. Obviously, at this time, she couldn't win against Jiang Hai by talking about the previous topic, so she wisely chose another topic. I don't want to talk to you anymore. These two girls won't leave. Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai snorted coldly, then turned his head and looked at the two girls who were as pitiful as injured kittens, but still stubbornly raised their heads. Jiang Hai originally wanted to send them away, but unconsciously, he gave up the idea. If it really doesn't work, I'll take them in. Although he also felt that it was a little inconvenient, it was better to stay with him than to let them be bullied outside. At least he wouldn't have any bad thoughts about them. I will contact your welfare agency. Please go ahead. Hearing that Jiang Hai had made up his mind to adopt these two girls, Moses Adams shrugged, although he felt that Jiang Hai was taking off his pants to fart and wasting his time. But since it was Jiang Hai's decision, then as a lawyer, he had to clean up after Jiang Hai. This was his job. After hearing Moses Adams say this, the two people from the welfare agency looked at each other and finally turned to leave. Hearing the sound of the two people driving away, Jiang Hai sighed. He couldn't take care of himself. Now, there were two more burdens. Looking at the two little girls standing in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled bitterly. You guys, you win. Come and eat with me. Jiang Hai nodded the heads of the two girls. Perhaps they knew that Jiang Hai wasn't going to drive them away again. The corners of the two girls' mouths couldn't help but grin. Their two big eyes were smiling like crescent moons, which was particularly cute. Jiang Hai didn't know whether it was right or wrong to take them in, but the most important thing was that this was his heart. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls knew that since Jiang Hai said that he wanted to keep them, he wouldn't lie to them. So, they went back, picked up the coats that Jiang Hai bought for them, and put them on again. Just now, Jiang Hai said that he would go to Mrs. Philemon's place to eat every day. Since they were going to live here in the future, there would probably be two more people coming over to eat. However, they also thought that this was what they should do. Since Jiang Hai had decided to let them stay, then in the future, the problem of eating Jiang Hai's meals, cleaning the house, washing clothes, and even warming the bed would naturally be their job. Now, the first thing they had to do was to learn how to cook as soon as possible. Jiang Hai didn't know what these two little girls were thinking about. After putting on the coats, Moses Adams also came back. After informing Jiang Hai, he didn't follow Jiang Hai to eat. Instead, he went back first. Tomorrow, he would go to help Jiang Hai with the adoption documents and so on. These things naturally had to be done by him as a lawyer. As for why he didn't eat, Jiang Hai didn't ask him to stay. Instead, he sent $1,000 to his account. This was also the fee for his hard work today. The other lawyer's fees were calculated separately. This was to make up for his meal. After receiving the text message, Moses Adams didn't refuse. After all, he was helping Jiang Hai mainly for the money. There was no need for him to refuse the boss's money. If you want a horse to run, you have to feed it. Jiang Hai knew this very well. After Moses Adams left, Jiang Hai took the two girls to Mrs. Philemon's house. When Mrs. Philemon came back, she didn't go to the cowshed. She was still watching TV in the living room. Seeing Jiang Hai bring the two girls over, she was a little surprised. Boss, didn't you say you would send them to the orphanage? When they were in Boston, Philemon had asked what to do with the girls after they were sent back to the manor. The 8 girls were already adults, so they could be hired as employees. These girls came from poor backgrounds. Now that they had the opportunity to live a stable life, they would probably be good employees. However, these 2 girls couldn't be. In the United States, it was illegal to hire child labor and illegal labor. Among them, illegal labor wasn't a big deal, but child labor wasn't a small matter. Therefore, Philemon was a little uncertain about Jiang Hai's thoughts regarding these two girls. Just now, the people from the orphanage came. They were really rude and even wanted to beat them. Although I know that this kind of thing is inevitable everywhere, but, so I decided to adopt them. Anyway, my place is very big, and I don't have anyone to talk to. They can accompany me here. I also need to find a school for them. Sitting next to Philemon, Jiang Hai rubbed his temples in distress. Looking at the two beautiful sisters standing next to him, he really didn't know what to say. Boss, sometimes your heart is too kind. Hee, but this is also good. With a kind boss, our lives will be much better. Philemon laughed after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Mrs. Turner, I'll have to trouble you to cook for 2 more people in the future. Do you want me to give you a raise? At this moment, Mrs. Philemon, who had been busy, came out of the kitchen. Looking at the tanned and plump woman, Jiang Hai said with a smile. What raise? The money you give me is to cook 3 meals a day. In the end, you don't eat at my place for at least 2 meals a day. I originally wanted to ask you to lower my salary, but now, I have a job again. Mrs. Philemon laughed heartily after hearing Jiang Hai's words. She walked to the fridge next to her and prepared to get some food. After hearing Mrs. Philemon's words, the 2 girls who had been standing next to her exchanged glances with each other. Then, they quickly walked to the fridge and helped Mrs. Philemon pick up the food. Mrs. Philemon originally didn't want them to work. After all, if Jiang Hai helped them, then at least in name, they would be Jiang Hai's daughters. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were their own little bosses. How could they let their boss work for them? But when she saw the desire in the eyes of the 2 girls, she couldn't help but be taken aback. Then, she took out the beef in her hand and handed it to the 2 girls. She knew that the 2 girls wanted to show off and prove that they weren't completely useless. To be honest, Mrs. Philemon's thoughts toward the 8 women were complicated. She felt pity, puzzlement, and vigilance. The people of the United States, or to be exact, the people of Europe and America, were basically like this. They weren't willing to interfere with the lives of others. Regardless of whether they were living well or not, it would make people feel that they were somewhat cold-blooded. But this was their life policy and way of dealing with people. Perhaps when they saw something that moved them or made them feel pity, they would give some monetary help. But other than money, they wouldn't give anything else. For example, they wouldn't casually let stray cats and dogs into their rooms, nor would they take in homeless people on the street. It was not that they were cold-blooded. After all, no one was willing to change their lives because of some trivial matters. Even in China, there were many such people. As the old saying went, when the father dies and the mother marries, everyone takes care of themselves. How could there be so much kindness? This was the origin of their pity and confusion. They couldn't understand why Jiang Hai brought them back. Based on their understanding of Jiang Hai, he didn't seem to have the intention of keeping the 8 girls at home. As for their vigilance, it was because they had also heard about the origin of these women. They didn't have proper jobs in the past. Although their backgrounds were somewhat pitiful, they were still employed in that kind of profession. It was already good enough that ordinary housewives didn't look at them with hostility. But it could be foreseen that these women would look at their husbands with unprecedented intensity. However, such complicated thoughts were mainly directed toward the 8 women. Daliana and Marian were obviously not among them. Mrs. Philemon was quite fond of the 2 girls, so she brought them into the kitchen. Seeing this scene, although Jiang Hai wanted to say something, he didn't. This was because he didn't know how he felt about the 2 girls. Now, he felt pity for them, but when he thought about living with them in the future, Jiang Hai. Hee. After waiting for a long time, a very Boston-style dinner began. Although Daliana and Marian ate well yesterday and today, their hearts were actually hanging in the air because they didn't want to go back to the orphanage. And Jiang Hai insisted on sending them back, which made them very afraid, so they didn't eat properly during the meal. This time, the two girls were finally relieved, and they ate freely. Jiang Hai was stunned when he saw this. Thinking about it, they hadn't eaten such delicious beef, fish, and soup for a long time. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid that they would eat too much, Jiang Hai estimated that they could eat for the whole night. After eating, although the two girls were full, they still stood up and helped Mrs. Philemon clean up the dishes. After everything was done, Jiang Hai took them back to his villa. Jiang Hai's villa was very large. Usually, there were only 5 living creatures in it: Jiang Hai, Goldie, Xiaobai, Dai Teeth, and Chirps. Chirps had been captured for a long time, but it hadn't grown up yet. Although it didn't look like a bald chicken, its range of activity was still limited to Jiang Hai's room. As for Dai Teeth, Goldie, and Xiaobai, they were running around. When Jiang Hai came back with the 2 girls, the 3 little guys also greeted them. They also had an impression of the 2 little girls, but although they were enthusiastic, the 2 girls had a natural fear of dogs. "Okay, you guys go play by yourselves. Don't scare them. They will be our family in the future." After kicking the 2 dogs' butts, Jiang Hai chased them aside and said with a smile. The 2 dogs heard Jiang Hai's words and looked at each other. Chapter 147. Perhaps with their IQ, it was difficult for them to understand what family was, but they also understood that there would be 2 more people to please in the future. Therefore, after wagging their tails at the 2 girls, they lay down and played in the distance. As for Jiang Hai, he took the 2 girls upstairs. "In the future, since you're going to stay here, come and take a look at your rooms. This is my room, the master bedroom. Your rooms are next to mine. These 4 guest bedrooms have all been renovated. You can go and choose which one to use as your room." As they walked to the 2nd floor, Jiang Hai introduced them. When they reached the 2nd floor, Jiang Hai saw that the door of his room was open. Needless to say, this was the masterpiece of Dai Teeth. Usually, Jiang Hai and his 4 pets always lived together, and only Dai Teeth knew how to open the door. Since Dai Teeth learned this skill, the 2 dogs didn't need Jiang Hai to open the door for them to go to the toilet every morning. Otherwise, do you think Xiaobai would be so kind to let Dai Teeth sit on her head? But a single man's room. Even if the 4 pets were more obedient and there was no strange smell in the room, there would naturally be a lot of garbage. As soon as they went upstairs, they saw that on the big bed, there was an unfolded quilt, and the curtains were not open. The open door had a lot of clothes, socks, and even underwear piled up. Although Jiang Hai was not obsessed with cleanliness, it was inevitable to change underwear every day. A man's underwear was easy to smell, and Jiang Hai was still a single man. Cough, cough, it was a bit off topic, but as soon as they went upstairs, Jiang Hai blushed because his room was indeed a bit too messy. After pretending to walk over and close the door, Jiang Hai pointed to the 4 rooms next to the girls. These were the 4 guest rooms, but now they were going to be the 2 girls' rooms. After Daliana and Marian looked at each other, they pushed open the doors of the rooms next to them and looked inside. Jiang Hai hadn't entered these 4 rooms since the renovation, but sometimes, when he asked the housekeeper to clean up his room, they would also clean up the guest rooms, so there was no strange smell and dust in the room. When they pushed open the door, the 2 girls' mouths turned into an O shape in surprise. They originally thought that the place they lived in would be similar to the place where Aphrodite lived, but they were obviously wrong. Jiang Hai's guest rooms were completely incomparable to the bedrooms of small villas. The spacious room had a big bed, a separate bathroom, and a small living room. The room had already been set up with a network cable, a variety of appliances, televisions, air conditioners, and so on. This room was even a room to live here. The decorations were no worse than a hotel suite. In fact, it was even better. Thinking that this would be their home in the future, the 2 girls didn't dare to step in. What? Not satisfied? If there's anything you're not satisfied with, just say it, write it down, and then I'll ask you to renovate it, but before that, you have to live here. Seeing the two girls hesitating, Jiang Hai said with a smile. No, I'm very satisfied, that's great. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls also gestured one after another. Looking at the movements of the two girls, Jiang Hai smiled. Although he didn't know why, Jiang Hai felt that if the two girls could speak, their voices should be very pleasant to hear. Suddenly, he remembered something. He didn't know if his blood would be useful. Just as Jiang Hai was pondering, the two girls had walked into the room quietly, looking around, touching here and there, for fear of breaking anything. If they hadn't accidentally turned on the TV, Jiang Hai might still be thinking. Seeing the two girls satisfied with the room, Jiang Hai also walked in. The other 3 guest rooms are similar to this one. You can choose one. Who will live here and who will live in the other rooms? Looking at the two girls, Jiang Hai said with a smile, but when they heard Jiang Hai's words, the two girls shook their heads. They had never been separated since they were young, so now, they were not going to live separately. Looking at their decision, Jiang Hai persuaded them. Seeing that they were really not just being polite, Jiang Hai didn't care. After giving them the key to the room and helping them get the quilt to cover them at night, Jiang Hai left. Returning to his room, Jiang Hai stood in front of the window and looked at the dark sky outside. He couldn't help but pat his face. Really, how can I be inexplicably soft-hearted? Muttering in a low voice, Jiang Hai didn't intend to take care of these people, but why did he suddenly fall ill? In the end, not only did he recruit 8 women as workers, but he also adopted 2 godchildren. He even had 2 goddaughters. How could it be so easy to get a goddaughter? Now that he thought about it, he felt a headache. He was still a child who hadn't grown up. Ugh, well, in fact, he thought that he hadn't grown up. But in any case, since Jiang Hai said that he would adopt them, Jiang Hai would not go back on his words. Although he wouldn't go back on his words, at least he wouldn't easily go back on his words. Don't think about it. Since I have decided, that's it. But there are still 2 questions. Hasn't Qili signed yet? What does she want to do? Also, think about it, when will I go back in February? Fu Yuan said that he will come over during the Chinese New Year. I will come back with him then. Touching the stubble that had just grown on his chin, Jiang Hai whispered in Chinese. He really didn't expect Qili's reaction. He originally thought that Qili would also want to get rid of him as soon as possible. After all, he knew that Qili had a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, although that guy was quite bad. But women, emotions would always prevail over reason. What's more, she was about to marry that man at one time. Moreover, she was a woman. It was useless for her to keep such a big family business. She would get married and have children sooner or later. Maybe in a few years, she would get involved with that man again. The reason why Jiang Hai thought so was not without reason. After all, he was Qili's legal husband, but the two had been married for more than a year. Not to mention doing other things, they didn't even see each other more than one hand. At first, he was jealous and annoyed. He would also call Qili to fight for something, but later he understood. In Qili's heart, there was no him at all. The two were not people living in the same world at all. Perhaps the intersection of worlds would create some intersection points, but as far as he was concerned, those intersection points were just illusions. Therefore, Jiang Hai didn't care about what Qili thought in her heart. A long time ago, he wanted to end this wrong marriage and start over. Finally, he was successful now. He was now a rich man, and his life had nothing to do with Qili. If it wasn't because of this incident, he might have forgotten about this woman. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about something, a series of knocks sounded from the door. Then, Jiang Hai looked back and found that Deliana had already arrived in front of Jiang Hai's room. Because Jiang Hai's villa was geothermal 24 hours a day. So it was very warm here, so Deliana didn't wear anything at this time. Her slender body was wrapped in a bath towel, and her hair was still a little wet. It looked like she had just washed her hair. Her small feet stepped on Jiang Hai's carpet. At this time, she was standing at the door, looking at Jiang Hai timidly. What's the matter? Why did you come here? Looking at the girl in front of him, Jiang Hai's eyes flashed with a trace of panic, but he still slowed down his voice and asked her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Deliana hesitated for a moment and took off the bath towel wrapped around her body. The scenery that Jiang Hai saw last night appeared in front of him again. Jiang Hai also understood her meaning from her eyes. She was sacrificing herself? Seeing this, Jiang Hai's face instantly turned ugly. He sighed and walked in front of Deliana. Seeing Jiang Hai walking over, Deliana's breathing became heavier. She subconsciously wanted to step back, but she stopped and slowly closed her eyes. She wasn't an ordinary girl who stayed at home all the time. She had seen too many men and women, so she vaguely knew what a man would do after seeing such a girl. She did this because she wanted to exchange her body for a stable and warm home. She didn't regret it at all. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai was not as bad as she had imagined, nor as despicable as she had imagined. After walking in front of Deliana, Jiang Hai admitted that this girl was indeed a beauty. She had big eyes, long eyelashes, and golden hair. Because it needed to be cut very short, it only reached her ears and was naturally buttoned inwards. Her face alone was enough to cause the downfall of a country, but according to Jiang Hai's score, she could be rated 80 points. However, Jiang Hai wanted to have a daughter, not a lover. So he just bent down, picked up the bath towel and wrapped it around her body. Deliana, hearing Jiang Hai's words and feeling the bath towel wrapped around her body, Deliana opened her eyes again. Remember, I didn't keep you here because of my desire, your body, or my guilt. You are my daughter here. Of course, you can also treat me as your friend, but we don't need to use our bodies. We only need to communicate with each other through our minds. Do you understand? I hope this is the last time, understand? A pair of black eyes stared at the blue eyes in front of her. Jiang Hai's words entered the girl's ears word by word. Sometimes, tears were so unbearable. Originally, the girl was stubborn even when she was caught and was about to be beaten. But after hearing Jiang Hai's words, her tear ducts unconsciously developed. Big drops of tears rolled down from her eyes and fell on Jiang Hai's carpet. Looking at Jiang Hai's serious face, Deliana nodded seriously and then threw herself into Jiang Hai's arms. Touching the girl's hair in front of him, Jiang Hai laughed at himself. It seemed that he was also changing. Chapter 148. What happened that night was just a small episode in Jiang Hai's life. When he woke up the next day, he felt that he had to adapt to his new life. When he got up, the two little ones were still asleep, so he decided to do some morning exercises before coming back to cook for them. In the end, when he returned, he found that the two little ones had woken up at some point in time. Not only did they tidy up the room, cook, and even wash the clothes. In fact, the most important thing was Jiang Hai's clothes, socks, and underwear. Looking at the underwear hanging in the bathroom on the first floor, Jiang Hai's face couldn't help but twitch. He felt a little embarrassed. However, he still accepted the girl's kindness. Perhaps in their eyes, they were troubling Jiang Hai here because they had to do something for Jiang Hai. It was not bad to deal with some housework. After breakfast, Jiang Hai took the two little ones and the 8 girls to the town of Winthrop. He gave the 8 girls a month's salary in advance. After all, they also needed to buy things. Jiang Hai wanted them to be independent, and they were very willing to do so. At the same time, when they learned that the two little ones had become Jiang Hai's daughters, they were also very surprised and envious. After all, they were still workers, but their daughters were different. After shopping in Winthrop for a day, each of them bought at least 3 sets of clothes to change into. Including the one given by Jiang Hai, they had bought 4 sets of clothes, including underwear. Although Jiang Hai didn't know much about underwear, these women more or less knew a thing or two. In addition to clothes, they also bought toothbrushes, toothpaste, towels, and so on. Naturally, Delina and Marion did the same. These girls might have laughed the most in the past few years, and it was also the most comfortable day for them. They shopped for a whole day. In the evening, Jiang Hai invited them to have dinner in the Italian restaurant in Winthrop before taking them back to the manor. Compared to these girls, Delina and Marion gained more things today. Not only did they have new clothes, new pajamas, and toiletries, but Jiang Hai also bought them 2 computers. Girls were different from boys. If Jiang Hai bought a computer or a laptop, it would definitely be an alien, or a Thor or a human from the future, who would use a laptop as a top PC. However, Delina and Marion didn't know how to choose these things. In the end, they chose 2 3-star computers. Well, in terms of beauty, Samsung and Apple were still the best. However, Apple's computers were not ultra-thin, while Samsung's computers were not. After buying all the things, Jiang Hai and the others completed their task for the day. The next day, Jiang Hai continued to go out to sea. After all, he still had work to do. When he went out to sea, naturally, he was teased by the old fisherman for a long time. But Jiang Hai also gave them a warning. These girls were his employees, so these people shouldn't have any thoughts that they shouldn't have. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, these people's faces became sullen. Obviously, Jiang Hai was not the only one who had such thoughts. Their wives also had the same thoughts. Except for Edward Anderson, in these days, when these men went to the toilet for a long time at night, their wives would knock on the door to make sure that they were inside. Hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It seemed that getting married too early was not a good thing. Although these people had bad luck at home, they were still very lucky outside, especially in the fishery. Also, after Jiang Hai used Big Dumb to drive away the fish, their catch was rapidly increasing. For 5 consecutive days, Jiang Hai and the others went out to sea, and the fish they caught in these 5 days were sold for more than $600,000. This was not including the food that Jiang Hai kept for himself. Naturally, in these days, Jiang Hai also gave out a lot of bonuses. Almost everyone received more than $10,000 in bonuses. They were very happy with this generous boss and worked more seriously. On the 4th day, Moses Adams came to Jiang Hai and gave Jiang Hai the certificate of adoption of the 2 girls. In fact, Jiang Hai was 27 years old. At least, he was still single in the United States. Whether he was married or not, it was impossible for him to adopt 2 14-year-old girls. However, there was a saying that money could make the devil push the millstone. When money and connections reached a certain level, even the millstone could make the devil push the devil, let alone the devil. Jiang Hai was in such a state at the moment. He had spent $200,000 on the adoption certificate. Once the $200,000 were thrown in, the welfare agencies that had been insistent decided to turn a blind eye to it. Who said that overseas was absolutely clean? If you paid them to commit fraud and break the law, they might not do it. But if it was just for them to turn a blind eye, they would be more than happy to do so. Just like that, Delina Iveline and Marion Iveline officially became Jiang Hai's daughters. Then Jiang Hai called Sh20 Clive and invited her to the manor for dinner. He also told her about sending the 2 girls to school. However, Sh20 Clive was in a bit of a dilemma, although she agreed with Jiang Hai's approach. The problem was that there was no school for the deaf in Winthrop. Although there was one in Boston, it was too far away and they had to live in the school. Now, the 2 girls were extremely dependent on Jiang Hai and were unwilling to leave Jiang Hai to live in the school. If they went to an ordinary school, they would easily be discriminated against and bullied. This was also something that Jiang Hai could not control. Most importantly, they had lived in the Welfare Institute since they were young. Although the 2 girls also studied there, the basic volunteers were only there for basic education. However, the volunteers at the Welfare Institute only taught them the most basic things. They were only at the level of a 3rd or 4th grader. The only difference was that they could recognize all the words. Under such circumstances, if they were to go to secondary school, they wouldn't be able to catch up. If they went to primary school, not to mention them, even Jiang Hai felt a little ashamed. So after thinking about it, the only way might be to find a tutor to teach them first. Fortunately, the learning atmosphere in the United States was extremely free. Even if they were self-taught at home, they could still take part in some school exams and get a review or something like that. It was just that they would not be given a normal grade. Jiang Hai was also relieved about this. After learning that Jiang Hai was going to hire a tutor, Sh20 Clive volunteered and said that she could come over on Saturday and Sunday to tutor the two sisters. Jiang Hai was also very grateful. But the two sisters were not very interested in Sh20 Clive, especially when they saw that she seemed to be quite close to Jiang Hai. However, in any case, the problem of the two sisters going to school was finally solved. Jiang Hai can now concentrate on fishing in his own fishing ground. Because the fish in the coral reef are not moving, he can only catch the fish in the sand, and with the help of Desha, he can drive them away. The progress was quite fast. According to Edward Anderson's research and estimation, the total value of all the fish in Jiang Hai's fish farm was about $8 million. The fish in the coral reefs accounted for about 60% of the total value. Because Jiang Hai was not willing to destroy the coral reefs, the 60% was not touched, which meant that 8 million of the 8 million were not touched. Of the remaining 2 million, about 1.5 million were seabed fish, which were sea cucumbers, sea urchins, crabs, lobsters, and the like. Although Jiang Hai would catch some every time he went out to sea, he did not catch too many. Therefore, these things were basically left over. Only 1.7 million of the fish needed to be caught, but they still needed to maintain the ecological balance. Leaving 20% meant that he needed to catch about 1.4 million fish. These fish needed to be caught because they would not be eaten up by these fish when they were harvesting the seeds of the wine seaweed. In the blink of an eye, it was already late January. Jiang Hai's income from pure fish sales had reached his initial expectations. There were even some unexpected gains, such as the blue marlin caught at the beginning. Although such good things did not happen again, Jiang Hai's fish were the best in this sea area. Of course, there were also many people eyeing Jiang Hai's fish farm. Some people even said that they wanted to buy Jiang Hai's fish farm. Jiang Hai was very generous. He would pay them 1.5 billion in cash in one lump sum, and the fish farm and manor would be given to them. Then, there was no then. In other people's eyes, Jiang Hai must be crazy. You bought it for 280 million a few months ago, and now you want to sell it for 1.5 billion a few months later. Who would be crazy enough to buy it? In this regard, Jiang Hai could only shrug, because even if he said that his 20,000 cows were worth 1 billion, no one would believe him. In this way, time slowly passed, and it was finally time to scatter the seaweed seeds. Early this morning, Jiang Hai was woken up by the doorbell. When he went over to take a look, he saw that it was also an acquaintance. The black man who sold his fish seedlings, Porter Aniva. In addition to him, there was also a white man. Jiang Hai also knew this white man. It was the boss who sold seaweed and seaweed seeds that Porter Aniva met. Hey, you guys came early enough. After opening the door to let the car of the two people in, Jiang Hai also changed his clothes, walked out of the house with a glass of milk, and looked at the two who were chatting with Ai Dehua and others who got up early in the parking lot. This is business, business. Of course, we have to be early. We can't let the customers wait for us, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Iron Bull Porter Aniva, who had a good temper with him, revealed his big white teeth and laughed heartily. Well, man, you're right, no wonder your business is getting bigger and bigger, but man, I only see you guys, where are my seeds? Shrugging, Jiang Hai said noncommittally. This kind of attitude is really good for business. Mr. Jiang Hai, you didn't build an airport here, so I put the seeds in Winthrop. When you are ready, you can fly over at any time to scatter them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the white man here also said with a smile. Chapter 149. Using a plane to scatter seeds of seaweed and seaweed was not as easy as one would imagine. In fact, this was a rather troublesome matter. First, Edward would go with them to see if there were any problems with this batch of seaweed seeds. Then, the others would sail over and throw down some kind of smoke bomb at the place where the seeds needed to be scattered. This kind of smoke bomb was very common. Its most common use was to float on the sea and emit thick smoke. Generally, planes would have this kind of thing so that if the plane was forced to land in the sea, the people who escaped from the plane could use this thing to locate them. But now, Jiang Hai and the others used this thing to mark the location of the wine seaweed seeds. If this thing was scattered too far away, it would not be in Jiang Hai's territory. If it was scattered too close, it would be scattered on the coral reef. Then, it would be good if 1 in 10 of these seaweed seeds could germinate and become a delicacy for the fish there. Therefore, the selection of the location was also very particular. Fortunately, the fishermen hired by Jiang Hai were all old fishermen. These days, while they were fishing, they also checked the distribution of fish below the sea area. They were still very considerate about the location of the seaweed seeds. After exchanging a few words with Jiang Hai, everyone set off. Edward followed them to the airport in Winthrop. As for Tommy Charles, Enoch Cece, Andrew Christian, and Marin Rupert, they all drove Jiang Hai's motorboats and went into the sea with smoke bombs. As for Jiang Hai, since he had nothing to do, he was also going to take a look. "You haven't been to the sea with me yet, do you want to go and take a look?" Jiang Hai glanced at Daliana and Marian behind him, who were still confused about the situation, and asked them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 2 girls nodded happily. "Hey, Marin, wait for us, let's go and take a look." Since the 2 girls were willing to go, Jiang Hai was not polite and directly said to Marin Rupert, who had not left yet. "Then you should wear more clothes, boss. At least give them more clothes." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marin Rupert, who usually doesn't like to talk, pointed to their clothes and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai immediately took the 2 girls upstairs to change into thicker clothes that could block the wind. After all, it was the coldest time of the year. It didn't matter if he was in good health, but the 2 sisters were not in good health. These days, they had been nourished by delicious food every day. In addition, there were a lot of fitness equipment in Jiang Hai's room. As a result, the 2 girls' bodies were no longer just skin and bones like when they first met. They now had some fat and muscles. But even so, it was impossible for them to withstand the cold wind outside. After Jiang Hai specially armed them, the 3 of them left the villa and drove a modified all-terrain vehicle in the direction of the dock. When they arrived, Tommy and the others were almost ready. In the beginning, Jiang Hai bought a total of 3 boats and a fishing boat. Now, it was just right for these 4 people to drive. Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian. These 3 people drove the boat and were almost ready. When Jiang Hai arrived, they were ready to set off. After greeting Jiang Hai, they drove the boat, broke through the layers of waves, and headed into the distance. As for Jiang Hai, he took the 2 girls and stepped on the fishing boat driven by Marin Rupert. "Boss, just sit in the cabin. When we arrive, we can go and look at the plate armor." After boarding the boat, Marin Rupert said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also agreed. He didn't have the leisure to go and look at the plate armor now. The wind outside was very cold. Instead of freezing outside, it was better to stay in the cabin and drink some drinks. However, compared to Jiang Hai, who had been to the sea many times, Delina and Marian were more interested in the outside world. After these days of getting along, Jiang Hai also had some grasp of the characters of these 2 girls. Although these 2 girls were twins, they looked almost the same, and their tastes were almost the same. They bought clothes of the same size. When they bought 2 pieces, at least when they wore the same clothes, Jiang Hai couldn't tell them apart. So the only way for Jiang Hai to distinguish them was their hair. Because Delina wanted to be a thief, her hair was cut very short. She pretended to be a boy so that she wouldn't attract attention. As for Marian, she still had long hair. This was the only difference between the two. But thinking about the future, if the two girls had the same hair length, it would be troublesome. However, although they looked the same and liked almost the same things, their characters were very different. Delina's character was more boorish. She was more curious about new things. She wanted to try everything that she hadn't tried before. She was also more courageous. After getting along with Xiao Bai and Little Yellow, she was now able to play well with them. At least, she wasn't afraid of them anymore. Marian was a very well-behaved girl. She was very timid, but she was very careful. She had a very stable resting time. Almost every day, she would clean up the house. She was also good at cooking. Compared to the energetic Delina, she was much quieter. She was still afraid of Jiang Hai's pets, but at least she had the courage to feed them. At this time, Jiang Hai was basically a shopkeeper who didn't do anything. He didn't even feed the pets because Marian would feed them. From now on, it could be seen that the characters of the two girls were different. Since boarding the boat, Delina hadn't been obedient. She had been looking outside the boat excitedly, looking forward to seeing something. Although Marian was also very curious and excited, she sat obediently beside Jiang Hai. She only looked up at the opposite window from time to time. After Marin Rupert called out, the fishing boat slowly moved towards the nearest point. Jiang Hai's fishing ground wasn't small, but it wasn't particularly large either. After sailing for about half an hour, the boat had already sailed out of the coral reef and entered the nearest place where Jiang Hai scattered grass seeds. After arriving here, the fishing boat slowly slowed down. "Boss, we're here." Following Marin Rupert's words, Jiang Hai also took out a box of smoke bombs from the cabin and walked out of the cabin with the two girls who had been looking forward to playing on the deck. As soon as they walked out of the cabin, the cold wind that was like an ice blade passed in front of Jiang Hai. It almost instantly went through the gaps in his clothes, making him shiver involuntarily. The northern hemisphere in January was indeed the most unbearable time. It should be the coldest time now. It will be much better in February. Seeing Jiang Hai shiver, Marin Rupert, who was beside him, also said with a smile. As for the two girls, although they were also shivering from the cold, they still opened their eyes curiously and looked outside. The original shore of the endless sea had turned into a thin line at this time. They could vaguely see the woods and buildings on the other side, but they couldn't see the specific details clearly. This was the first time the two girls came to the sea. As soon as they got on the deck, they looked around curiously. Pay attention to safety. Don't get too close to the railing. If you fall, it will be troublesome. After shouting at the two girls, Jiang Hai helped Marin Rupert open the box in front of him. Compared to the two girls, Jiang Hai, who had been to the sea several times, and Marin, who had been dealing with the sea most of his life, the sea was actually not that fun. After all, the sea was different from the land. The land had all kinds of sceneries, but the sea was the same everywhere. It was very novel at first, but after the novelty, it became boring. After opening the box, Jiang Hai and Marin took out some smoke grenades from inside. After opening them, they threw them directly into the sea. The smoke would float on the sea for about 3 hours. After 3 hours, the smoke grenades would lose their effect. Although this also created some marine garbage, this garbage would be carried by the ocean currents to Jiang Hai's beach. At that time, Jiang Hai and the others would naturally clean it up. After throwing 5 or 6 smoke grenades here, Marin got off the boat again and went to the next location. About an hour later, the location was completed. If Jiang Hai was sitting in a plane at this time and looked down from above, he would find that the sky above his fishing ground had been drawn an irregular circle by colorful smoke. This was the place where the wine grass seeds were needed. About 10 minutes later, a roar slowly passed from a distance. Then, a small plane entered Jiang Hai's sight. After the plane's lower cabin door opened, bags of unwrapped grass seeds fell from the cabin into the sea below. So this is how the grass seeds are scattered. I thought it was some kind of high-tech. Looking at the other party throwing the grass seeds directly into the sea, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. Originally, he thought that planting seaweed might be like planting rice, which would be very troublesome. But obviously, the word troublesome doesn't exist in the dictionary of the Americans. The Americans, to be exact, are Westerners. They worship the law of nature, which is the survival of the fittest. Whether it's raising or planting things, they don't care too much about them. Except for some extremely luxurious things, they just create the best and most suitable living conditions and then raise them freely. Just like children, most of the children in the United States will not be spoiled like in China. Instead, they will cultivate their independence from an early age. Of course, this is not absolute. There will be people who will spoil and cultivate them. This is a matter of proportion. Chapter 150. The plane above his head left after 3 rounds, and Marlon Rupert returned to the cabin, preparing to return. That's it? Seeing that Marlon had gone down, Jiang Hai also walked into the cabin with Daliana and Marian, who were still unsatisfied. Suddenly, he felt that his money seemed to have been spent in vain. He could have just thrown it away casually. He had spent real money to buy those seaweed seeds. How could they just throw them away like that? Can they guarantee that they will grow? Of course, that's it. These seaweed seeds were carefully cultivated by them. Before they scattered them, they must have tested the water quality here and watched the weather forecast. They must have confirmed that there will be no southward currents or blizzards recently. As long as these seaweed seeds can safely fall on the sand at the bottom, there is a 70% chance that they will grow into seaweed. Marlon Rupert laughed when he heard Jiang Hai's amateurish words. The sea was not land. You could plant things one by one, as long as you didn't find it troublesome. There was water pressure in the sea. The deepest place in Jiang Hai's sea area was a few hundred meters deep. Humans definitely couldn't go down. It was also impossible for machines to do so. Otherwise, the seaweed seeds wouldn't be so cheap. Although Jiang Hai understood that Marlon was telling the truth, he still curled his lips. This was the mindset of a small farmer, and he couldn't change it in a short time. I can bear with it if some of the seaweed seeds are washed away. What if the fish run away when I raise them? He thought for a while. The seaweed seeds were indeed cheap, but the fry were expensive. He had spent so much money to buy the fry, so he had to inquire about it. There are 2 ways. One is to build a net around it, but I don't recommend it because it will be very troublesome for our fishing boats to go out. The net and propeller will easily be entangled with these things. Secondly, I also heard that boss bought the fry. The fry are very small at the beginning, so if we build a seine, we need to make the mesh very small. But if the mesh is very small, not only will it block the fry's way out, but it will also block the microorganisms, shrimp, fish, and so on brought in by the ocean currents. The most important thing is actually the microorganisms. In this case, boss, the coral reef you left behind may starve to death in a few years. Once the coral reef dies, the ecological balance here will be destroyed, and even the water quality will become very bad. When Marlon heard Jiang Hai's words, he thought about what Jiang Hai said and understood what Jiang Hai was thinking. Indeed, Jiang Hai was thinking about whether he should use something to block this place, but now listening to Marlon, Jiang Hai also sighed. It seems that his thinking is still too simple. What's the second idea? After hesitating, Jiang Hai asked him. That is to feed them. In addition to the early mullet, cuttlefish, shrimp, and so on, we regularly put some bait in the place where the fish go. This will attract the fish to stay in this area and not go out. It will even attract the fish outside. Now, most marine fisheries do this. Marlin explained after hearing Jiang Hai's words. But if we feed them, it will be very troublesome. Hearing Marlin's words, Jiang Hai thought about it in his heart. Indeed, it is more suitable to use food to keep these fish here than to build a net cage, and the most important thing is. What is Jiang Hai's first goal here? To upgrade the dragon balls in his body. If he really destroys the environment of the fishery, it is estimated that he will be dreaming if he wants to grow 8 scales in a day. It's quite troublesome. Right now, we only have fishing boats in our fishery. It's wrong to use these fishing boats to fish, but if we use them to feed, we might be able to go out in the morning and come back the next morning. Marlin said to Jiang Hai after thinking for a while. He heard from Edward Anderson that Jiang Hai has long wanted to buy a plane, and he came to him because he can fly a plane. However, Jiang Hai has not made up his mind recently, but now it seems that he has to make up his mind. Buying a plane is very expensive. Compared with the fish in the fishery, Jiang Hai feels that a plane doesn't seem to be so distressing. After hesitating, Jiang Hai asked Marlin Rupert in front of him. It's okay, but it's not cheap. Generally speaking, a large manor like ours will be equipped with 2 planes, a helicopter and a normal agricultural plane. The fishery I used to work in used Poland's M18, Australia's GA200 is also not bad, and the top one is New Zealand's. But speaking of domestic aircraft, there is the air tractor. If you buy this in our country, you will get a discount. But recently, the Nong 5 in Wuxia is also not bad. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marlin Rupert also said. Listening to his introduction, Jiang Hai's head is really big. These planes are really diverse. These planes, the cheap ones are $100,000, the expensive ones are about $300,000, I don't know the specifics. In the end, Marlin summarized and gave a price. Hearing this price, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. So cheap. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that a plane, no matter how agricultural it was, would be worth a few $1,000,000. After all, in his impression, planes have always been toys for the rich. At least, he didn't dare to think about it before. Thinking about some of the reports he read before, some rich artists bought planes that cost tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions. Even if it was 20 million renminbi, it would only be more than $3 million. In his opinion, it was very expensive. This was also the reason why he always said he would buy it but didn't. But now that he heard Marlin Rupert's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. How could a plane be so cheap? In fact, Jiang Hai was confused about one thing. The kind of plane that Jiang Hai was thinking of was a passenger plane that flew everywhere. In addition to the cost of the plane, there was also the cost of the crew, the captain, the fuel, the money to stay at various airports, the money to apply for flight routes, and so on. It could be said that these were 2 completely different things. Agricultural planes were naturally not passenger planes. Its main structure was actually not much different from the planes in the early stages of World War II. First, it couldn't fly very fast. It was basically impossible to exceed 300 kilometers per hour. To put it bluntly, if a car drove faster, it might fly faster than it. Second, it couldn't fly very high. Basically, it could fly more than 1,000 meters. Third, agricultural planes naturally couldn't fly everywhere. Some large airports and the like didn't allow agricultural planes to be used. To put it bluntly, agricultural planes were used for farm work, not to go out and show off. That was all. In fact, the plane that Marlin was talking about was the kind that people drove, large agricultural planes. If it was some small drones, such as the small ones used in forests or planting areas, one could be bought for about $10,000, or even a few $1,000s. Compared to these agricultural planes, those were really big toys. Where can I buy these planes? Do I have to build a runway or something? Hearing Marlin Rupert's introduction, Jiang Hai was also a little tempted. If it was only a few $100,000 or a few $100,000, he really didn't care too much, so he immediately asked. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marlon smiled. Boss, do you have a black card? Boss, don't you have a black gold card? You can make a phone call and American Express will do it for you. They can help you contact them for whatever you want to buy. As for the runway problem, it's also easy. Because it's a small agricultural plane, it's not heavy, so you can just build a flat cement road for a few hundred meters on the edge of the manor's pasture. Plus the warehouse to park the plane, it will cost more than $10,000. Based on his experience, Marin Rupert calculated and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was also very tempted. When the boat returned to the dock, Jiang Hai first called American Express. Soon after, a seductive female voice prompted him. His phone received some company quotes and details of the planes. There were dozens of planes in total. Jiang Hai himself didn't know much about these things. He didn't understand at all. He could only understand how high the plane could fly, how heavy it was, and how much it weighed when it took off. After all, they were all planes. The weight of these planes was at least 1 ton. However, what interested Jiang Hai the most was the air tractor. Although this was the most expensive agricultural plane, because he was an investor in the United States, he bought this thing with a discount. Among the air tractor series, Jiang Hai was most interested in the AT-802. One of the reasons why Jiang Hai was interested in this kind of plane was that the plane itself was particularly big. With a weight of 3 tons, this guy was a giant among the agricultural tractors. Just like buying a car, Jiang Hai liked big things. The maximum takeoff weight was 6.5 tons, the maximum cruising speed was 280 km per hour, and the maximum speed was 360 km per hour. Although it wasn't particularly fast, it was still the fastest agricultural plane. The reason why Jiang Hai decided so quickly was mainly because of some other news. This kind of aircraft was not only an extremely powerful existence in terms of agricultural use, but it was also an extremely powerful existence in other aspects. Even in South America or some less developed countries, this kind of plane belonged to the series of fighter jets. Because of the high cruising speed and weight, it meant that the metal sheet was thick, the defense was good, and the carrying capacity was high. This meant that it could be modified into any shape you wanted. All kinds of weapons, such as Gatling guns and rockets, as long as you wanted it, it could be installed. Even Wuxia had bought many of these planes. What did this mean? It meant that this thing was indeed a good thing. Although Jiang Hai didn't think of installing missiles on it, he was sure that this thing was not very expensive, so he didn't hesitate. Chapter 151. Hey, boss, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to blow up Winthrop? Jiang Hai's intention to buy a plane was a big deal. After all, he had just arrived here and didn't know much about these things. Therefore, after deciding what to buy, he didn't directly pay for it. Instead, he planned to discuss it with his subordinates. After learning that Jiang Hai wanted to buy this Big Mac, not to mention others, Philip was the first to shout. Blow up my ass. Do you think I can blow up a small town in the United States just because I want to? Are you kidding me? Although Jiang Hai had the idea of modifying it, he wouldn't admit it in front of Philip and the others. Hey, boss, the air tractor is good, but it consumes too much fuel. If you really don't want to blow up Winthrop, then there's no point in buying it. That's right. To be honest, boss, we just want to buy a plane to throw some bait or patrol the surrounding area. We don't need such a heavy plane. The price is enough to buy 5 dromedaries. I don't think it's necessary. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia and the head of the fishermen, Edward Anderson, who had just returned, also said hesitantly. These two were people who dealt with the ocean and ranching all year round. In their eyes, spending money was fine, but every dollar should be spent on the blade. If Jiang Hai wanted to buy a private plane, they had no right to ask how much it would cost. However, if he wanted to buy a plane for the manor, it would be a little too expensive. Hey, boss, I support you. When I was in the Triangle State, we also had this guy. This guy really has a lot of uses. After modification, it can be used directly on the battlefield. If it's not modified, it can also be used as a battlefield ambulance plane. If it's not hit by a rocket launcher, no matter how large a caliber gun hits it, it's impossible to penetrate its protective panel. At this time, Bell said with a smile. Although he said he supported Jiang Hai could tell that he didn't support Jiang Hai's decision. After all, this thing was too expensive. If they really didn't need to fight, then there was really no need to buy it. However, once Jiang Hai made a decision, he wouldn't be so easily persuaded. You have to be clear that what we need is a large agricultural plain. Our manor is this big now, and the fishing ground is this big. But I might need to expand it. I see a lot of empty land near us. Those are my targets. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. As for the expansion, he said, well, he was actually lying. He has invested so much money in this manor now, and he hasn't seen any results yet. How can he easily invest more money? Hee, boss, stop fooling around. If you buy a fishing ground, you'll be buying the high seas. The US government won't dare to sell it to you there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tommy Charles didn't believe it and said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Indeed, the range of his fishing ground was about to reach the high seas. If he bought more, wouldn't he have to buy the high seas as well? Thinking of this, he also felt that his excuse was a little fake. Just as Jiang Hai fell into embarrassment, a voice slowly came from behind. Actually, I feel that there is no problem with the boss buying this plane. Looking at the voice, they saw Marlon Rupert standing not far behind Jiang Hai and talking leisurely. Because the boss's fish are very mixed, if these fish are placed in one place, they will easily kill each other. Fortunately, the boss's fishing ground is very big, so they can be placed in different places. But in this case, to feed them, they will have to go to many places. If it's a plane like a dromedary, there will be no way to continue to go to two places. But if it's an air tractor, then there is no need to worry about cruising at all. It can put all the fish in one place, which will save a lot of trouble. Hearing Marlon Rupert's words, everyone remembered this. The guy in front of them was not a master who played by the rules. When others bought fish, they tried to buy fish that could be raised together, but he was different. This guy bought a bunch of fish in the east and a bunch of fish in the west. Most importantly, many of the fish were predatory and couldn't be raised together. If that's the case, the air tractor is not bad. Hearing this, Edward Anderson also nodded. Hearing the fisherman's boss say so, the others couldn't say anything and could only agree. Hearing that everyone agreed, Jiang Hai immediately called the company's American Express service. The phone rang less than 3 times before it was picked up. It was the same sweet female voice who asked Jiang Hai in Chinese, "Hello, Mr. Jiang, I am Maxie Williams. How may I help you?" Although Jiang Hai's funds were slowly decreasing, at this time, the amount on his card was at least 8 figures. He was definitely a big customer of American Express, so the operator naturally didn't dare to be careless. Hearing the operator's voice, it was indeed sweet. At least 5+ signs were needed, but Jiang Hai was already used to it. "Hello, Miss Maxie, I'm Jiang Hai. I've decided to buy an air tractor, at 802. Where do I need to buy it? How much is it?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Maxie continued to ask, "Hello, sir. What model do you want?" "Model? I'm really not sure." Hearing Maxie's question, Jiang Hai was stunned. He didn't look carefully just now. "It's like this. At 802 is a general name. There are many submodels under it, such as the Model A. This plane is mainly used for conversion into a private jet. The price is slightly more expensive and needs to be customized separately. The price of the bare plane is $680,000 and needs to be shipped back from the headquarters in Texas. The Model U plane is an anti-riot plane. It can be equipped with many types of weapons, equipment, and so on. You can choose to customize and install it yourself, but you need to apply for a local license to install it. The price of the Bear plane is $710,000. The price of the other modified planes is uncertain. If you want to choose a plane for your manor, you can choose the Model F. This model is mainly used for forest firefighting and agricultural applications. It can be used for spraying medicine and feeding food and bait. The price of the Bear plane is $410,000, but if you buy it, there will be a certain discount. The price is about $370,000. Moreover, this model is sold all over the country, so it's convenient for you to pick it up at any time. Hearing Maxie Williams's words, Jiang Hai remembered that it seemed to be like this. I want the Model F. He didn't even need to think about it. Even if he bought a private jet in the future, it was impossible to buy an air tractor modified. Not to mention the Model A, $380,747, he had to at least buy something similar. But now, those were just floating clouds. After all, his manor didn't have any income yet. Okay, F-type air tractor, there is a sales place in New York. You can choose to see it yourself, or you can choose to buy it for you. Hearing that Jiang Hai has decided, Maxie Williams also said sweetly. Then I'll buy it myself. It wasn't that Jiang Hai didn't trust American Express. It was mainly because he was a farmer. It was also known as persecutory paranoia. He had been thinking about what if these guys were lying to him. He could think about other things, but if the plane suddenly broke down in the middle of the flight, who could he cry to? At that time, he would be all alone. The little savings in the bank and this manor would all be taken by the American government. In the spirit of not letting anyone take advantage of the American government, Jiang Hai decided to go see it himself. Okay, Mr. Jiang. The New York Farm aircraft is sold at XX Street in Manhattan. If you need anything, you can call me at any time. Maxie Williams smiled and said when she heard that Jiang Hai had decided to go see it himself. After the phone call, Jiang Hai fell into deep thought. Originally, he wanted to go to New York soon because he still had the tickets that Moses Adams had helped him get. As a basketball enthusiast, he could only watch the All-Star game in front of the TV in the past. Now that he finally had the chance to go live, he couldn't let it go. Therefore, he had to go. Now, he just had to bring it forward. Jiang Hai had already decided that the All-Star game would end on February 16, Wuxia time. After watching the game, he would take a flight back to Wuxia that night. Including the transfer time, it would be around February 18. He had to go back on New Year's Eve. It wouldn't delay him from burning Joss paper. After spending New Year's at home, he could bring Fu Yuan and the others over to play. As for the others, if they were free, they could come over and play. He didn't lack the money to play with them anyway. However, there was a problem. Delina and Marian had just been adopted by him this year. Although they could now live in Jiang Hai's house, there would still be people from the welfare agency coming to check on them from time to time. Most importantly, in order to prevent Jiang Hai from being a human trafficker, he didn't allow them to leave the United States with him. It wasn't a problem to go to New York to watch the game, but it seemed that he couldn't go back to China. He had to discuss this with them. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at Delina and Marian. Seeing Jiang Hai's gaze, the two girls looked at each other. It was obvious that they didn't understand the reason. When they saw Jiang Hai looking at them, they looked at Jiang Hai and blinked. Oh, you too. Seeing their actions, Jiang Hai was amused. He couldn't help but rub their heads. Some things had to be said eventually. It wasn't his style to hesitate. Chapter 152. Are you guys really not going? Really not going? Standing in front of his F-650, Jiang Hai looked at the two sisters in front of him with a serious expression. When the two sisters heard Jiang Hai's words, they blinked their big eyes. After looking at each other, they shook their heads very seriously. Well, sometimes people like to think too much. Obviously, Jiang Hai was such an existence. He originally thought that if he were to leave, Xiao Huang, Xiao Bai, Dai, Qiuqiu, Elena, and Marian would be very sad, very uncomfortable, and very reluctant to leave. It turned out that it was just an illusion. After he made his decision that day, he told the two girls that he was going to return to China during dinner that night. After he finished speaking, the two girls did not cry, throw a tantrum, get angry, or throw a tantrum. At that time, the two girls just looked at him seriously and nodded to show that they understood. Then, he said in disbelief that he was going to watch an NBA game and asked them if they wanted to go. Who knew that they weren't interested in it either? It was understandable. Girls, especially a girl who couldn't even eat her fill in the past, would not have the time and energy to be interested in basketball and the NBA. So, they weren't willing to go. Originally, this should have been a good thing for Jiang Hai. He could go to New York without worry and go home without worry. But why did he feel so unhappy when he saw the two girls' nonchalant expressions? These days, he had been beating around the bush and asking the two girls if they were really not going. In the end, the answer he got was, they were not going. In fact, Jiang Hai did feel that he was a bit too important. The two girls stayed with him not because they liked him or were overly dependent on him, but because they really needed a place to take them in. Otherwise, Deliana would not have taken the initiative to give herself to him after she decided to stay. They did not treat Jiang Hai as their father. Indeed, it was not easy to treat a man who was only 13 years older than them as their father. Their original idea was that even if Deliana had to sacrifice her body, she would still want to give her sister a good living environment. Even if she became Jiang Hai's lover, she would still have a better life. However, they did not expect Jiang Hai to be so good to them. In fact, it was not just them, even the 8 women had the same idea. In their opinion, the reason why Jiang Hai was willing to take them in and let them stay in the manor to help out was secondary. It was very likely that Jiang Hai liked them. For them, using their bodies in exchange for a place to live and food to eat, they had already acquiesced. Becoming a tool for Jiang Hai to vent his anger was better than living a life of not being able to eat enough, not being able to wear warm clothes, living in a wooden shed, and trembling in fear. They never had the luxury of living like a normal person. In fact, even if Jiang Hai had asked them to sleep in their own rooms, they wouldn't have had any objections. Similarly, after these days, they found that they were really living in a dream. This Jiang Hai didn't seem to have any other thoughts about them. This made them feel touched, but also a little guilty. After all, they didn't have an official job. Although the hardware of the wine manor was there, they still needed to wait until the beginning of spring, which was March, to plant grapes. Recently, they had been eating for free. Moreover, Jiang Hai didn't want their bodies, which made them feel sorry for Jiang Hai. Therefore, during the day, they would always stay in Jiang Hai's villa to help with work, clean up, bathe Little White and the others, take care of things and so on. Even at night, they would always stay until very late. In fact, they were hinting to Jiang Hai that he could let them stay. However, Jiang Hai really didn't know anything about this aspect. Even after so many days, he still couldn't figure it out. He only thought that these girls came to his house every day mainly because they had nothing to do during the day. Moreover, the other women in the manor were also very wary of them. They had no place to go, and they were somewhat dependent on him, so they came to his house every day. It turned out that Jiang Hai was indeed thinking too much. Since the grass seeds were scattered, everything went according to plan. 3 days after the grass seeds were scattered, the grass seed company made a special trip to check how many grass seeds were left on the seabed after the previous scattering. Then, they replanted 2 more times. The grass seeds were completely planted by the grass seed company. Edouard Anderlin had been watching by the other party's side. This was not because Jiang Hai was narrow-minded, but because he did not feel at ease if he did not send someone to watch over these things. Compared to these people, he was more at ease with Edward Anderson, whom he had trusted for a few months. After Anderson confirmed that the grass seeds had begun to grow and reached the expectations, Jiang Hai did not withhold the payment and directly transferred the balance to the company. Having such a straightforward customer, the company's manager was also quite happy. After all, Jiang Hai's job was a big one. Doing such a job was equivalent to his usual quarterly earnings. As long as it was done well, Jiang Hai would inevitably need to replenish the sea of grass every year. At that time, even if the company did not earn that much at one time, it would still be a considerable income. Because of this, he specially gave Jiang Hai a discount. For things like discounts, Jiang Hai naturally did not refuse. After all, he did not have a proper income yet. After half a month of growth, the seaweed officially grew and began to take root and germinate. The construction period of the second wave of the fishery had arrived. At this time, live bait would be put in. In fact, it was called live bait, but it was mainly 4 kinds of creatures. Of course, it was not the real cuttlefish, but the cuttlefish. It was not too clear to call it cuttlefish. This cuttlefish was such a small cuttlefish that could not grow up. In China, this cuttlefish was called sycamore flower. It was born to live at the bottom of the marine food chain. This small cuttlefish was the food of almost all aquatic fish. Its only characteristic was that it was extremely large in number, and naturally, it was also very cheap. For example, the cuttlefish that Jiang Hai fed to the fish only cost $300 per ton. A boat of 10 tons of squid was only $3,000, which was quite cheap. In North America, no one ate this kind of squid. Those 2 types of mollusks were the most abundant. After all, each boat only cost $3,000. Considering the number of fish that Jiang Hai wanted to raise, 20 boats of each type would be enough, although he would have to replenish them on a regular basis. After all, Jiang Hai was free-range, and they could reproduce on their own. 10 boats only cost $30,000, so 40 boats in total would be settled for $120,000. Compared with those 2 types of food, the other 2 types of food were slightly more expensive. As for the other 2 types of creatures, one was the Arctic prawn. Since it didn't matter how big or small it was also sold by the ton. However, a ton of these prawns cost $2,000, which was $2 per kilogram. They were all alive, so it wasn't that expensive. Jiang Hai liked these kinds of prawns very much, so he bought 10 boats of them for $200,000. In addition, there were also some miscellaneous shellfish. These shellfish didn't have much meat, and their shells made up most of their weight. However, these shellfish were indispensable, because apart from fish, Jiang Hai also raised a lot of crabs and lobsters. These shellfish were mainly their food, so in addition to the fact that the shells of these shellfish were too heavy, they were basically uncountable. 10 tons of shellfish and 9 tons of shells. Even so, 1 ton still cost $500, or 50 cents per kilogram, which was almost double the price of cuttlefish and octopus. However, in order to raise the lobsters and crabs that he would raise in the future, Jiang Hai still reluctantly bought 30 boats of these things. Each boat weighed 10 tons, which was $150,000. In addition, there were other miscellaneous items, which cost Jiang Hai $500,000 in total. Ever since Jiang Hai's seaweed began to rise, the company that he contacted would put in 1 or several boats of these baits in different areas every day or 2. They wouldn't put them in all at once. This was because if they put in too many baits at the beginning, they would swim away in groups. Therefore, they had to wait for these guys to digest for a while before pouring them in slowly. This was considered a delicate job. Fortunately, all of this was within the process that Edward Anderson and Jiang Hai had discussed. The entire month of February was used to spread the bait, and it was only in March that the fry were officially put in. Because recently, the deaf and mute girls in the family often helped with the chores, Jiang Hai didn't even need to wash his own socks. So he had more time to put his energy into the manor's construction. Especially the construction of the runway and hangar. Although he couldn't help much, it didn't stop him from watching from the sidelines. As the weather gradually warmed up, the snow gradually melted, and the sun in the middle of February gradually raised the temperature above zero. Time gradually passed, and it was February 12th. There were only 2 days left until the first day of the All-Star weekend, which was February 14th. Jiang Hai still had to go to New York to buy a plane, so it was time for Jiang Hai to leave. Chapter 153. Alright then, I'll be leaving. Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, Buck, you guys have to listen to me. Chirp chirp, don't let it eat too much recently. This bird has become too fat. Also, you guys have to take good care of yourselves. Every night before you go to bed, you have to video call me. Do you understand? Looking at the two big lolas who didn't care about his expression at all, Jiang Hai's heart turned cold. But even so, he was still like a father, telling them everything. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although the two girls didn't have any expression on their faces, they were telling the truth. From their trembling hands and trembling eyes, it could be seen that they were very touched. It had been a long time since someone cared about them like this. You guys too. If there's anything, you can video call me at any time. After instructing the girls, Jiang Hai raised his head and looked at the 8 women who came to send him off, then said to them, "Let's go." These girls originally didn't have cell phones. For them, cell phones were useless because they couldn't make calls. Although cell phones could video still cost data. No one would think that making a call in the United States didn't cost money, right? They originally didn't even have money for food, so it was impossible for those people to arrange cell phones for them. After they came to Jiang Hai's place, Jiang Hai also gave each of them a cell phone. It was the latest iPhone 5S from Apple. Don't think that this thing is very expensive. It turned out that Apple really wasn't expensive in the United States. The 3 cell phones came with 16G, 32G, and 64G, and the contract phone cost $199, $299, and $399 respectively. Of course, this was referring to the contract phone. This meant that when they bought it, they had to pay a 15% activation fee and a 7% tax. In total, they had to pay $199, which was $227. After that, they had to go through the procedures. Every month, they would have to pay $20 for the phone and $20 for the data package. In other words, it would be $40 a month. Some people said that this wasn't appropriate. $40 a month, that would be $960 for 2 years. The price of a non-contract phone was $649, which was actually much more expensive. Jiang Hai chuckled at this. It seemed that they were trying to change the topic. It seemed that the cost of the cell phone and the package added up to $1,200. Compared to $650, it was $550 more expensive. However, who would buy a cell phone and make a call for less than $600 in 2 years? No one would be naive enough to think that calling in the United States would cost RMB. Of course, the main reason why they didn't buy a contract phone in China was because the quality of the two things were different. But in the United States, they didn't have to worry about this, because if they broke, they could be replaced. Therefore, the girls in Jiang Hai's manor each had a $199 iPhone 5S. It was a very expensive configuration in China, but in the United States, it was really a low-grade equipment. After buying the phones for the girls, Jiang Hai taught them how to use it. They could send messages and video chat. This way, they would have a communication tool in the future. We will take good care of ourselves. Don't worry. Hearing Jiang Hai's nagging, Daliana slowly gestured. These days, she had been teaching Jiang Hai sign language every night. Although the progress was a little slow, the effect was good. At the very least, Jiang Hai had a preliminary understanding of some of the words. In normal communication, he could even guess the correct words. Finally, the problem of communication between the two was solved. Jiang Hai felt that his blood might be helpful to the defects of these girls, but he was still not too sure. Secondly, he didn't know much about these girls, so he still needed to take it slow. Moreover, the most important thing was that he was about to level up. He wanted to level up first. Well, boss, if you don't leave now, the plane will be too late. Just when Jiang Hai was about to mutter, Belle, who was sitting in his car, couldn't help but smile and say. Because Jiang Hai was going back to China directly from New York, he didn't plan to drive. Well, take care of yourself. I'm leaving. After saying a few more words to these girls, Jiang Hai stepped on his car. After Jiang Hai sat down, Belle also started the engine and went out of the manor. Watching Jiang Hai leave, the girls also bit their lips. They really couldn't see through Jiang Hai. Maybe this guy is really a good person. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know that he had been given 10 good person cards. Soon after the car left the manor, it got on the road and went straight to the highway. Boston Airport was outside Boston, and it was in the same direction as Winthrop. That was to say, Boston Airport and Winthrop were in the middle, so he didn't need to go to Boston Airport to go to the airport. In less than half an hour, Jiang Hai had already arrived at Boston Airport. Because he had already booked a ticket online, he directly changed his ticket and went through the security check. This time, he went to New York, which could be said to be returning to China. He almost didn't bring anything with him. He just brought 2 sets of clothes, that's all. First, he didn't have any relatives in China. He felt that he was going back mainly to visit his parents' graves. He was too lazy to visit relatives. Second, his local specialties couldn't be brought directly on the plane. Did he have to bring a pile of premium-grade beef to New York to watch the game? So before this, he had already used air courier to send these things back to China. He first asked his brothers to help him keep them, and he would distribute them when he went back. So naturally, at this time, he was going light. After passing the security check, Jiang Hai didn't go directly to the waiting hall, but went to the waiting room of the first-class cabin. Although it was only 2 to 3 hours drive from Boston to New York, since he was going to take a plane, with Jiang Hai's current wealth, he would take the first-class cabin. Not only would he take it here, but he would also take the best one back home. It was not that he was pretentious, it was purely because he had money to burn. Well, after he had money, he really didn't want to squeeze into the economy cabin anymore. Anyway, in his opinion, the price of the first-class cabin and the economy cabin was not much different. Soon after sitting in the waiting hall of the first-class cabin, there was a message that they were ready to board the plane. Passengers in the first-class cabin were given priority to board the plane. After lamenting that the flight attendants of American Airlines were really ugly, Jiang Hai nestled on the huge sofa and prepared for the plane to take off. Not long after, the plane took off. Jiang Hai also leaned on the sofa and fell asleep. But before he could fall asleep, the plane had already arrived. Boston and New York were too close. It was so close that even if an NBA team played a game, they would take a bus instead of going to the airport. Because of the time spent waiting at the airport, they might have already arrived by car. Only Jiang Hai, who was not going to drive, would take a plane. Of course, in fact, he could take a long-distance bus, which was not slow, but when he thought about squeezing in a bus with so many people, Jiang Hai still felt that it was better to take a plane, even if all the flight attendants on this plane were over 40 years old and had waists of more than 2 feet 6 inches. A little more than an hour later, the plane landed on the tarmac of New York's JFK Airport. As the ground crew connected the covered bridge, Jiang Hai and the other first-class passengers also got off the plane early. As soon as he walked out of the airport, Jiang Hai saw a black car in the distance. The car was not unfamiliar to Jiang Hai, and he was even more familiar with the person standing in front of the car. "Hey, boss, you're here." Seeing Jiang Hai walking towards his car, Moses Adams, who was standing in front of the car, also greeted him with a smile and said to Jiang Hai with a happy face. Since he knew that Jiang Hai liked basketball, and he got Jiang Hai's tickets, it was not a big deal for him to come and watch the game with Jiang Hai. In order to keep a potential and powerful customer like Jiang Hai, he was very careful. "You've been here for a long time?" Jiang Hai asked Moses Adams with a smile as he walked in front of him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams immediately waved his hand. "Oh, no, I just arrived." "Come on, boss, I'll take you to the hotel, I've arranged everything." Hearing what Moses Adams said, Jiang Hai smiled, then threw his small bag in the back seat and sat in the passenger seat of Moses Adams' car. After seeing Jiang Hai sit down, Moses Adams also took him to the center of New York City. This was Jiang Hai's first time in New York, so as soon as he entered the city, he looked around curiously. For Jiang Hai, New York's name was much more important than his own sense of existence. New York, the largest city in New York State, the largest city in the United States, and the largest city in the world. It was the most densely populated city in the United States. Its existence could directly affect the world's economy, finance, media, politics, education, entertainment, and even the fashion industry. Its GDP was also the world's largest. Before that, it was the capital of Japan. As soon as the car drove into New York, Jiang Hai felt the difference between this city and Winthrop, or even Boston. The pace of life here was faster, the people here were more hurried, the buildings were higher, and there were more cars. As soon as he arrived here, it gave people a very busy feeling. Maybe he was used to staying in the manor recently. When he suddenly arrived here, Jiang Hai was really not used to it. Maybe he saw Jiang Hai's curiosity about the city. Moses Adams, who acted as a driver beside him, also kept introducing the city. However, Jiang Hai only took a cursory look. If he wanted to see the sights here in New York, it would take at least a few days, but he obviously didn't have so much time to visit here. He had already arranged everything for these days. He would rest here today, go to Space City tomorrow, and go to All Stars the day after tomorrow. Chapter 154. Look, this is our destination this time, the home court of the New York Knicks, MSG. As Moses Adams introduced the place, Jiang Hai also observed the existence of the City of Hope and Destruction. After about an hour of driving into the city, the car finally arrived at the first stop. As Moses Adams stepped on the brakes, a huge circular building appeared in front of Jiang Hai. The building was really big, like a big cake. Although it was not as big as the high-rise buildings next to it, it was still very surprising. However, the most surprising thing was that it was not only a court, but also a station. MSG, Madison Square Garden's nickname, New York's locals, or people nearby, call it that, is above New York's largest Penn Station. This is done so that everyone who comes to New York by train can see it first after getting off the train and understand the city. Boss, you may not know this, but this arena is not just the home court of the Knicks. It is also the home court of the New York Rangers, New York Liberty, St. John's University, Red Storm University, and other teams. It is also the place where all musicians, speakers, and politicians in the United States hold their concerts or speeches the most. Looking at the building in front of him, Moses Adams's shrewd eyes revealed a rare look that was not so shrewd. For him, even if he was not working in New York now, this building still made him very proud. Looking at his expression, Jiang Hai also smiled. Perhaps this was like the Great Wall and the Forbidden City in China. After all, the history of the United States was only a short period of time. They did not have any historical deposits, and they could not recognize the Native Americans who had lived on this land for a long time as their ancestors. Therefore, they did not have a sense of historical achievement and belonging that could make them feel more proud. It was also because of this that the United States had also supported some landmark buildings over the years, giving them special meanings other than architecture. Obviously, Madison Square Garden was one of them. Everyone who was familiar with basketball knew that Madison Square Garden was the mecca of the basketball world. Every year, the NBA draft was held there. In addition to the NBA, the other leagues also had special feelings for this place. Alright, boss, let's come back the day after tomorrow. We have to go back to the hotel now. Put down your luggage and have dinner. I have arranged a special program for you tonight. Perhaps Moses Adams was done lamenting. He retracted his gaze and became shrewd again. Then, he looked at Jiang Hai and winked gently. This made Jiang Hai feel a little strange. Show? What program? Don't forget, we have to buy a plane tomorrow. Yes, this time, Jiang Hai asked Moses Adams to come, not only to accompany him to watch the game, but also to buy a plane, and he needed his help to take a look. Don't worry, boss. It won't affect our business. Moses Adams knew how important the plane Jiang Hai wanted to buy was to his manner, so he just smiled. Then, he walked back to the car, started the engine, and left. The hotel Jiang Hai was going to stay at tonight was not particularly far from here. It did not take long for them to arrive. When the car was parked, a doorman took the initiative to open the door for Jiang Hai and Moses Adams to get out of the car. After standing still, Jiang Hai looked up. Wow, it was really a famous hotel, the Hilton Hotel. Speaking of this hotel, not only in the United States, but also internationally, it had a great reputation. This hotel was founded in 1919 by the emperor of the hotel industry, the hotel tycoon, Conrad Hilton. Their hotels existed in Europe, America, the Asia-Pacific region, and even the Middle East and Africa. It could be said that this was the top 5-star hotel in the world. It was Jiang Hai's first time staying in such a hotel. Boss, this way please. Seeing Jiang Hai standing at the door, Moses Adams, who was about to walk in, stepped back and said to him. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai also smiled a little awkwardly, carried his backpack, and walked into the hotel. Looking at this hotel from the outside, it was magnificent enough. But after walking in, one would find that the outside was the outside, and the inside was actually the most dazzling. Not only was the decoration extremely high-end, even the waiters passing by were handsome men and women, making it easy for people to have a good impression of this place. While Jiang Hai was still looking around, Moses Adams had already gone to change the room card, because he had already booked it. There were 2 standard suites. Although they were not presidential suites, they were not bad. According to Moses Adams, in addition to the master bedroom, there was a separate living room, bathroom, dining room, and a room similar to a chess room. It was very spacious. Recently, it was the All-Star weekend, and there were many rich people and celebrities who came to watch the game. If it were not for his own connections, it would not have been so easy to book a suite here. Boss, let's go. I know you Wuxia people are particular about this. This is for you. After briefly explaining to Jiang Hai, he handed a room card to Jiang Hai. The room number on the card was 8888. Looking at the room number and listening to Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Indeed, Wuxia people were particular about this. Because neither of them had luggage, naturally, there was no bellboy to take them to the room, which saved them a lot of tips. When they arrived at the door of the room, Moses Adams, who lived not far from Jiang Hai, called out to Jiang Hai. Boss, when you go back in a while, you can take a shower and change your clothes. Then, we'll go for dinner first. After dinner, I'll take you to a good place to play. Seeing Moses Adams raise his eyebrows, although Jiang Hai was not too sure, from his words and actions, he felt that this guy was definitely up to no good. He was not worried that this guy would kidnap him or anything like that. Jiang Hai was not that easy to deal with. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, this guy wanted to use a man's way to get to know him. If a man wanted to have a better friendship with another man, other than being gay, there were only 4 ways. Whether it was at home or abroad, such things were not uncommon. TSK, this guy is really wretched, but it's not bad to go and have a look. Cough, I decided to go and have a look because I want to criticize the justice of this evil world. It's not because I haven't had sex for 2 or 3 years. Looking at Moses Adams, who was far away, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise a middle finger at him, and then he whispered. But why did it feel like the more he whispered, the softer his voice became. After entering the room, Jiang Hai did listen to Moses Adams and took a shower first. The bathtub in this suite also had a massage function, which was quite comfortable. Originally, after taking a shower, he was ready to sleep, but for some reason, he couldn't fall asleep in bed. The wretched look of Moses Adams talking to him just now kept replaying in front of him, which made him a little, overwhelmed. In fact, Jiang Hai really hadn't touched a woman for a while. Damn, this damn guy. Cursing again, Jiang Hai rolled on the bed. He didn't know when he fell asleep. When he was awakened by Moses Adams knocking on the door, it was already 4:30. When he saw Jiang Hai's sleepy appearance, Moses Adams smiled. "I say, boss, you can really fall asleep." "Huh, don't sleep. Wash your face. Let's go eat. The show will start in a while." When Moses Adams mentioned the show, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up in an instant. "Okay, wait for me." After saying that, Jiang Hai went back to the room, washed his face, then put on a new set of clothes and walked out. But just as he walked out, he was stopped by Moses Adams. "Boss, didn't you bring other clothes?" Change to something more expensive." After thinking about it, Moses Adams considered Jiang Hai's usual dressing habits and changed his words to remind Jiang Hai. "Who the F***CK, isn't this expensive enough? Brand, Archaeopteryx." When he heard Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows raised. "In the beginning, it's just a bird. This dress, no matter how expensive it is still outdoor. Have you ever seen someone wearing outdoor clothes to pick up girls?" "Boss, with all due respect, girls nowadays are very realistic. If you don't encounter ghosts crying and gods howling, it's better to pay more attention to your dressing." Hearing Jiang Hai's shocked words, Moses Adams showed a helpless expression and slowly explained to him, but his words made Jiang Hai speechless. "The problem is, I don't have other clothes. I don't like to wear other clothes." Glancing at the room, Jiang Hai came out this time with a total of 3 sets of clothes. He wore 1 set and brought 2 sets, but unfortunately, these 3 sets of clothes were all outdoor. A long time ago, Jiang Hai liked to wear sportswear for nearly 10 years, but in recent years, he liked to wear outdoor clothes. It didn't look so young, it was comfortable, and it didn't restrict his activities. For example, he didn't like suits at all. Even casual suits, he didn't like to wear them, so he didn't have any of them. The only one he had was the one he wore when he married Lu Li. When he left, he also left it at Chi Li's house. It was made for him by her family. "Since it's just clothes, then that's it, but we need to add some other things." Scratching his head, since Jiang Hai didn't want to wear it, then Moses Adams couldn't force Jiang Hai to wear a suit, right? He could only think of other ways. Chapter 155. Moses Adams was now very glad that he had considered enough time, so he came to call Jiang Hai at 4:30. If he had really called Jiang Hai on time, it was estimated that it would be too late now. Since Jiang Hai did not want to change his clothes, he had to think of other ways. The two of them went downstairs without eating. They got into the car that was already at the door and went straight to New York's Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue was an important thoroughfare in the Manhattan area of New York. It ran from north to south, from Washington Square Park in the south to 138th Street in the north. There were many scenic spots on Fifth Avenue. From south to north, there was the Empire State Building, the New York Public Library, Rockefeller Center, Rockefeller Foundation, St. Patrick's Church, Central Park, and so on. But at this time, Moses Adams and Jiang Hai did not come here to see the scenic spots. Instead, they came to the section between 60th Street and 34th Street, a place called Dream Street. Almost all the luxury brands in the world gathered here. It was one of the most high-end shopping districts in the world. Someone calculated that the shops on this street had an annual rent of $1,000 per square foot, about 0 0.09 square meters. That was to say, 1 square meter would cost more than $10,000. The annual rent of a small shop here was more than $100,000. It could be seen that if one did not open for 3 years and opened for 3 years, one would lose a lot of money. Of course, those luxury stores were not those that did not open for business for 3 years, nor were they those that opened for business for 3 years. But even so, most of the time, it was the season when people would see more and buy less. The only exception was probably when the Wuxia tour group came. Those aunties were very rich. Moses Adams dragged Jiang Hai here to buy things, but he did not expect to earn a commission. Men and women were two completely different life forms. The values, psychology, and so on of these two life forms were completely different. Even if they paid attention to the opposite sex, their viewpoints were naturally different. When men looked at women, the first thing they looked at was the face, the second was the figure, and the third was the clothes, the way they dressed, and the way they talked. Only then would they have the idea to explore further. But women looked at men differently. Just like what the ancients once said, girls love pretty boys, and girls love girls. When girls were young, that is, when they were 16 or 17 or 17 or 18, they paid more attention to the boys' looks and popularity. For example, the captain of a basketball team, the captain of a football team, and so on, were very popular. Of course, if they were handsome and had such skills, they would be the favored son of God, commanding the wind and clouds of the school. However, as they grew older, the things that girls paid more attention to gradually changed. Perhaps for some girls, looks were still very important. But for most girls, especially the girls who were going to the place Jiang Hai and Moses Adams were going, looks were obviously not as attractive as Franklin. For these women, they could judge a man's general situation by looking at his things. Unless you're really famous, like Bill Gates. Even if he wore briefs and walked barefoot on the streets, countless women would still throw themselves at him. If you're not that famous, then you'll have to rely on these external factors. Of course, some people might say that such women were not sincere. Love did not need to be tarnished like this. However, Moses Adams would tell you, who needed her to be sincere? Love? Even if there was, it was impossible to give it to them. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai came here. How to judge whether a man was rich or not, whether he had the strength. For a woman, the simplest preliminary judgment was 3 points. First, what kind of clothes, second, what kind of car, and third, what kind of watch. He didn't want to change Jiang Hai's clothes, so he let it go. He also couldn't buy a car now, so he let it go. The most likely thing to show that he was rich was a watch. It was said that the poor played with cars, the rich played with watches, the loser played with mobile phones, and the rich played with supercars. But for Jiang Hai, he had only heard about it before. He really did not play with these. Although he was not short of money now, in terms of his realm, he was still in the category of playing with mobile phones. Now, Moses Adams wanted him to skip the level of playing with cars and directly upgrade to playing with watches. He really couldn't bear it. We're here. But Moses Adams was still very considerate of his boss. He drove the car over and parked it directly in front of a building. After the two got out of the car, Jiang Hai also followed Moses Adams into the shop. "Hello, sir, what can I do for you?" When the two of them walked in, a good-looking girl came out with a smile that showed 8 teeth. She asked the two respectfully, but when she asked, her eyes were mainly looking at Moses Adams. Judging from his aura and clothes, it was obvious that he was the one who was in charge. "My boss wants to buy a watch, so I brought him here to see it." Moses Adams was a smart person. He immediately saw that the other party did not seem to take Jiang Hai too seriously, so he immediately said seriously and specifically mentioned Jiang Hai. "This way, please." As soon as she heard Moses Adams' words, the saleswoman couldn't help but be stunned, but she quickly reacted and continued to smile, taking the two to the counter next to her. "This is the Legacy series of Vacheron Constantine, and it is also the best watch we sell here recently. This series of watches ranges from thousands of dollars to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Many friends from Wuxia like this series very much. Our brand can also be regarded as one of the top in the world. In the 007 series, most of the watches of the male leads were sponsored by us. Looking at Jiang Hai, the saleswoman here began to talk non-stop. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai, who was still a little dazed, gradually recovered. Looking at the watch pointed by the woman, Jiang Hai glanced at it, but he was also shocked by what he saw. As expected of a luxury watch. This watch was really ridiculously expensive. It looked just like the Legacy series that the woman had just mentioned. Yes, there were cheap watches. The ones that cost $7,000 to $8,000 did not look good. A Vacheron Constantine that cost $7,000 to $8,000 did not look much different from the ones sold on the streets. The only difference was that the watch was made with a hollow design. However, these watches were ridiculously expensive. The one that Jiang Hai had his eyes on had a price tag of $150,000. That was no joke. $150,000 was enough for him to buy 50 boats of cuttlefish. This price was really a little scary. Can I not buy this watch? After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai looked at Moses Adams. He was a little reluctant to part with it. How should I put it? Actually, it's fine. This is mainly up to you, boss. To be honest, whether you buy it or not is not a big problem for me. The main thing is not for tonight's operation. After all, one night is not worth more than $100,000. However, boss, don't you know that after the All-Star game, there will be an NBA cocktail party? There will be a lot of dignitaries at that party. Even if you don't want to have too much contact with these people, I remember that you said that you would come to New York in April to participate in the beef show. Sometimes, it is necessary to have some connections. Seeing Jiang Hai's reluctance, it was actually very difficult not to see it. Because right now, Jiang Hai's face was almost wrinkled into the word reluctance. Spending $100,000 to buy a useless watch. Jiang Hai was really speechless. But after hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai could not help but click his tongue. It was just as Moses Adams had said. When a person's fame had not reached a certain level, the strength of their clothing was also very important. At least it gave people the feeling that this guy was not trying to get something for nothing. Although Jiang Hai did not think that his beef would be sold out, he had many friends. However, he understood the problem of having more friends, more options. So, he was a little tempted by what Moses Adams said. If I don't buy it, I'll buy the best one. Miss, what's the most expensive watch you have? After struggling for a long time, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and cursed. Then, as if he had thought it through, he raised his head and spoke to the salesperson in front of him. Oh, the best watch we have is Patek Philippe. It is known as the blue-blooded aristocrat of watches, that's it. What's the most expensive one? Since he had already decided to spend money, Jiang Hai did not care about the price and directly asked. At present, in addition to the limited edition and special custom-made watches, the most expensive one is this series of men's watches with complex functions. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the salesperson here said with a serious face. Then, he went to a counter next to him and took out a watch. Jiang Hai looked at it and his vision went a little dark because it was clearly marked 980,000, 98,000. It seems that the bragging has gone too far. Looking at the price and then at the small broken watch, Jiang Hai did not hear what the salesperson was explaining. What platinum dial? What nonsense. He did not understand. He just felt that his ears were ringing. His eyes were also staring at the watch. He could not see how this watch was valuable. Sir, are you sure you want this watch? Seeing that Jiang Hai's state was a little strange, the salesperson asked carefully. Yes. Listening to the salesperson's words, Jiang Hai took 3 deep breaths again. In the end, he almost gritted his back molar and used the strength of his teeth to force out the word he did not want to say from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, he handed over the bank card. "Okay, I'll wrap it up for you right away. This is my business card. If you have any questions or need any consultation, you can call the number on the card. I'm on 24 hours a day." The moment Jiang Hai handed over the card, all the female salespeople in the room looked at Jiang Hai differently. Especially this girl, who almost swiped the card for Jiang Hai, filled in the form, and so on. Finally, she handed over a personal business card and looked at Jiang Hai seriously and firmly. Chapter 156. Now that it's done, let's go eat. Returning to Moses Adams's car, Jiang Hai opened the gift box in his hand, then took out the watch inside and put it on his left wrist. As for the gift box, he was certainly reluctant to throw it away. He simply put it in the tidying box in front of the passenger seat. After listening to Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams started the car and winked at Jiang Hai. "Of course, with such a watch, what kind of banquet can't you go to?" In fact, boss, I think you don't have to care about the banquet. Didn't you see the look in the eyes of the waiters here just now? As long as you call this number tonight, I promise you will have a very happy night." "What do you mean?" Obviously, Jiang Hai was still too inexperienced. When he heard Moses Adams's words, he was stunned. What does this mean? Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Moses Adams also smiled. His boss is really inexperienced. It's very simple. Didn't the waitress just say that it's on 24 hours a day? She can explain the function of this watch to you on the spot. If you don't get anything tonight, then you can call her and tell her your room number. When a beauty comes, it's inevitable that she will have a meal, watch a movie, and then go back to your room to study the watch. It's almost very late. It's so late. It's not good to let a girl go back alone. Hearing Moses Adams say this, Jiang Hai immediately interrupted, "I can send her back." But after Jiang Hai finished speaking, he was embarrassed. Looking at Moses Adams's slightly shocked face, Jiang Hai smiled embarrassedly. In fact, after he finished speaking, he understood what this guy meant. "It's good that you understand. The specific operation still depends on the boss, but tonight you are the backup force. You can go all out and have fun." Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams said earnestly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also bit his lip. His heart was really a little itchy. "Okay, let's go, let's go." As Moses Adams honked the car horn, the car restarted. Then the two went back to the Hilton Hotel and had a simple dinner in the buffet restaurant there. They waited until 6:00 in the evening. When it was almost 7 o'clock, the two finished their meal and left the Hilton Hotel by car. This time, their destination was the Standard Hotel in the meatpacking area of New York's Lower City. Don't look at this 18-story hotel, which looks ordinary, but in fact, the top 2 floors of this hotel are the largest nightclub in New York, the Boom Room. Because the people who can come here to play, except for some young models who want to make a name for themselves, are either rich or noble. This is not like other nightclubs, where you can sneak in by having a good relationship with the security guard at the door. If you don't have an appointment, it is impossible to enter. But even if the 13 spaces here are high, when Jiang Hai appeared in front of the nightclub, he couldn't help but frown. It was not the first time that Jiang Hai went to a nightclub. When he was in China, he went in with his friends because of curiosity. But to be honest, Jiang Hai is not too interested in nightclubs. It is too noisy, and the banging makes people feel very uncomfortable. Don't worry, this is the best. There are a variety of styles, and there will always be something you like. Perhaps seeing that Jiang Hai was not interested in this place, Moses Adams, who was walking in front, said to Jiang Hai with a smile. "I hope so." Shrugging, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Then the two entered the nightclub through a special passage, but as soon as they came in, Jiang Hai heard the deafening loud music like other nightclubs, which made him frown. But since he was here, it would be unreasonable if he didn't experience it. He was still patient, enduring the thumping in his chest, and walked into the nightclub. As soon as he walked in, he saw a huge stage. The whole stage was T-shaped. At this time, a rock band was sweating hard on the stage, singing music that Jiang Hai found strange and noisy. Under the stage, countless white-collar workers who had nothing to do after work, or some people who came here purely to flirt and pick up girls, waved their arms and shouted loudly. At the back of the stage, there was a girl dressed simply. She was standing in front of a DJ stand, sometimes flirting and sometimes waving her arms to liven up the atmosphere. There were also many tables and cages in all directions of the room. Inside these tables and cages, there was a girl standing locked, dancing provocatively. The men below waved money and stuffed the money into their underwear or blouse to get a touch. The whole scene was annoying and extravagant, and Jiang Hai was a little excited. It's too noisy here. Forcibly pulling his gaze back from those simply dressed girls, Jiang Hai pulled the eager Moses Adams and shouted in his ear. Then let's go to the second floor. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Moses Adams now wanted to squeeze himself into the crowd and take advantage of those girls, maybe he could take two back tonight, but Jiang Hai was the boss. If he was not satisfied with this place, then he would not stay here. With great perseverance, he pulled back his gaze and led Jiang Hai to the second floor. When the two of them took the elevator to the second floor, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. This was because the second floor was completely different from the first floor. If the first floor was very dry and wild, then the second floor was very quiet. After getting out of the elevator on the second floor, they entered a passage. The entire second floor had only one color, gold. The entire passage was filled with golden mirrors. On both sides of the passage, there were women wearing all kinds of deep V-necks and all kinds of little dresses that exposed their arms and legs. They were talking and chatting here. Of course, there were also some men mixed in. He leaped over these figures and looked behind them. That was the hall. There was a huge triangular bathtub that was emitting steam, making the entire second floor look like a fairyland. It gave people a hallucinatory feeling. Just as Jiang Hai was looking around curiously, a girl who was closer to them came over with a smile and said to them, "Hello, do you two have an appointment?" This girl looked to be 25 or 26 years old. She was wearing a black deep V-neck dress. The opening almost reached her navel. It could be said that it was two pieces of cloth that wrapped her upper body from top to bottom. It could be clearly seen that she should be wearing nothing inside. Her lower body was also red, and she was wearing a pair of black high-heeled leather shoes. Her brown curly hair, coupled with heavy makeup, really gave people a sense of wild beauty. If some ordinary people can still be mixed in with the first floor, then the people who can go to the second floor are really rich. Hearing the girl's words, Moses Adams said with a chuckle, "I have an appointment in advance. My name is Moses Adams." After Moses Adams signed up, the girl in front of Jiang Hai touched her ear with her hand. Jiang Hai saw that there was a headset in the girl's ear. It seemed that she was confirming the identity of the two people. "Mr. Moses Adams, hello, the room you booked is here." After waiting for about a few seconds, the other party had already confirmed the room Moses Adams had booked. She smiled and led the two of them to a box in the distance. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai found that this box was really different, because the floor of this box was actually transparent. They could clearly see the wild people on the first floor under their feet, who were dancing there. But they could see these people, but they couldn't hear any sound. The effect of the compartment here was really good. Of course, if they want to listen, they can do it at any time because the floor can be adjusted. As long as there is a gap, the wild music below can go straight to the second floor. But Jiang Hai didn't want to listen to that music. "What do you two want to drink?" When Jiang Hai looked at his feet curiously, the girl who led them here was not polite at all. She sat directly next to Jiang Hai and Moses Adams and asked the two of them sweetly, "Boss, what do you want to drink?" Hearing the girl's question, Moses Adams also looked at Jiang Hai. Whatever, just give me a dozen beers. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai recalled his impression of alcohol. It seems that in such a place full of 13 boxes, drinking beer is a bit degrading, but he is really not used to drinking foreign wine. Well, a bottle of Hennessy, 3 dozen Corona, and the rest, you can do as you see fit. Hearing Moses Adams's words, the girl couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Although they didn't seem to have ordered a lot, the wine alone could be sold for thousands of dollars here. It seemed that the two of them didn't lack money. Okay, I'll arrange it now. Hearing what Moses Adams said, the girl here also stood up, swaying her body, and walked out of the room. In less than 5 minutes, some waiters had already walked into the room with wine glasses, fruit plates, snacks, and so on, filling the small coffee table. Moses Adams didn't care at all. Picking up a piece of watermelon in front of him, Jiang Hai took a bite and asked Moses Adams, "This is the program you talked about?" "Boss, don't worry, the show is just about to start." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also laughed. Just as he finished speaking, a female voice sounded from the door, "Hey, handsome guys, can we come in and have a drink?" Chapter 157. Following the voice, Jiang Hai looked at the door, only to see that the originally empty door was surrounded by a group of girls after the wine was served. These girls were all wearing very simple clothes, almost similar to the woman who led them in just now. A lot of skin was exposed. Among these women, there were obviously Caucasians, blondes, Latinos, blacks, and even Asians. One by one, they stood outside the door and spoke to the two people in the room. "Welcome, my dear ladies." Hearing these girls' words, before Jiang Hai could react, Moses Adams had already stood up and walked to the door naturally. Then he reached out and put his arm around the shoulders of the two girls standing at the outermost side, leading them into the room. Originally, Jiang Hai was still wondering why they had such a big box with only the two of them. This box was indeed not small. According to the domestic KTV saying, this box was considered an extra-large box. The box had a huge bathroom, a row of huge sofas, and a huge TV screen. This TV screen could be set to singing mode, and it could also be used to watch TV. Of course, the people who came here to play were not here to sing or watch TV. The third function of this TV was to broadcast the performance below live. These girls had obviously been here for a long time. They were not unfamiliar with such a scene. After walking in with Moses Adams, they had already come to the sofa and sat down directly. Many people skillfully poured the wine in front of them or opened the beer. The sofa that Jiang Hai and Moses Adams were sitting on was still very big. At this time, after so many people squeezed in, it became a lot more crowded. Even the two girls beside Jiang Hai were firmly stuck to him. To be honest, this was Jiang Hai's first time encountering such a scene. From the corner of his eyes, he could clearly see that these girls were barely wearing, very simple clothes, but their prominent vital parts were exposed. His nose also smelled the scent of various perfumes and body fragrances fused together. Their thighs and upper circumference filled his line of sight, so in an instant, he became hard. Of course, it wasn't that his big brother was hard, but his body was hard. He now felt that his neck was going to have cervical spondylosis. Although it was impossible for him to get this disease since he got the Dragon Balls, he still felt that his neck was hard and painful. Bang 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 bang. At this moment, a girl also turned on the TV. It happened to be the live broadcast of the concert below. The harsh sound instantly entered Jiang Hai's mind and also relieved him from the original embarrassment. "Hey, miss, please change the channel or lower the volume because my boss doesn't like this kind of music." Moses Adams may have remembered that Jiang Hai didn't like this kind of music, so when he heard this song, he struggled out of the gentle land and said to the girl over there. He said this very skillfully. First, he told these girls that Jiang Hai didn't like this. Second, He also told them that Jiang Hai was actually the big rich man here, not him. From the position of the sofa just now, it could be seen that many of these girls came for him, especially those white girls, who were all gathered around him. Besides the Latino girls, there was only one Asian girl around Jiang Hai. It was not Moses Adams' style to ignore his boss like this. Hearing Moses Adams' words, these girls also looked at Jiang Hai. Their eyes were either surprised, or a little puzzled because they really didn't see any characteristics of a rich man from Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also chuckled. Sure enough, girls love money. My dress is too ordinary. Hello, sir. Nice to meet you. My name is Maggie. The Asian girl next to Jiang Hai reacted faster. She smiled, picked up a bottle of beer, and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. This Asian girl, in Jiang Hai's eyes, was very petite. She seemed to be more than 1.5 meters tall. With high heels, she was only 1.6 meters tall. Her originally petite figure looked even more delicate next to these Caucasians. This girl was not like the Asian women that Europeans and Americans had in mind. They all looked like Hua Mulan in the cartoon. This girl was very much in line with the Asian aesthetic point of view. She had curly hair dyed blonde, big baby eyes, a sharp chin, a high nose, delicate skin, small lips, and slightly thick lips. Jiang Hai did not know if she had gone under the knife, nor did he know what she looked like without her makeup, but purely based on her current appearance, she was indeed not bad. Hello, you can call me Jiang. Jiang Hai naturally did not have stage fright when meeting with beautiful girls. He picked up the beer in front of him and clinked glasses with the other party. When Jiang Hai picked up the beer, the watch he had just bought on his left wrist was also revealed. As soon as they saw this watch, the eyes of these girls who hung out here all day long lit up instantly. Their eyes were very sharp, very sharp. Whether a piece of clothing or jewelry was real or not, they could tell at a glance. Jiang Hai's watch must be real. It seemed that Moses Adams' words just now were not just a compliment to Jiang Hai. It seemed that Jiang Hai was really a hot gold mine. Thinking of this, two girls smiled and walked to Jiang Hai's side. As for the other girls, they did not move because for them, although Jiang Hai was a gold mine, after all, there was already someone sitting next to him. If they fell one step behind, it would be easy to fall behind. Instead of thinking about Jiang Hai's problem, they might as well continue to pursue Moses Adams. Moses Adams said that Jiang Hai was the boss mainly to make Jiang Hai more popular, but he was not ready to give up playing. It was naturally the best if someone stayed. Almost instantly, a certain balance was reached on the sofa. There were a total of 13 girls here. 7 were sitting on Jiang Hai's side at this time, and 6 were sitting on Moses Adams' side. It was a very suitable number. Jiang Hai was very passive in this regard, and he did not know how to talk about this, but it did not matter if he did not know how. He just needed to show his financial resources, because these girls naturally had a way to lead the topic. For example, the girl who had just drunk with Jiang Hai smiled and asked Jiang Hai, looking at you, you should be Asian. Which country are you from? Oh, I'm from Wuxia. What about you? Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai asked curiously. Wuxia, I'm from Japan. You don't hate me, right? Hearing Jiang Hai say that he was from Wuxia, the girl's face showed a hint of surprise, and then whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. Although Jiang Hai was not a nationalistic youth, to be honest, a Wuxia man, especially a man from the northeast, who did not hate Japanese people, but at this time, in front of him was not a man, but a delicate beauty. Jiang Hai really did not know how to answer this question. Hee. By the way, are the cherry blossoms and Mount Fuji really beautiful in your country? Since this question was not easy to answer, Jiang Hai could only change the topic. It was not his turn to care about politics and national affairs. Of course, that's the beauty of our country. Are you interested in our country? How much do you know about Japan? When it came to her country, the girl also talked about it with a trace of pride on her face. To be honest, my understanding of your country is more about movies. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai said a little awkwardly. When she heard Jiang Hai's words, the girl pouted and looked at him with contempt. AI way is just AI way. Although I like my country very much, I know that our country's film industry is not very developed. Except for ghost movies, everything else is very average. You are a big man, it's impossible for you to like watching ghost movies. Hee, tell me, which star do you like? Being exposed by a girl in front of his face, Jiang Hai was indeed a little embarrassed. But when this girl could face him and talk about AI way with him, Jiang Hai suddenly realized that he was still too naive. This wild world. He was somewhat unable to adapt, but he was now trying to adapt. I prefer Aoi and Porto. Oh, and Rio Tian Hai. The stewardess' surname is Aoi, so she should be called Aoi-sensei. She is indeed very powerful. Now she has many sales of her films, which can be ranked in the top 100 in the world. As for Porto, it's Porto no Yui. To be honest, in our country, she is not very famous. She is mainly famous in Wuxia because she looks like a star in Wuxia. Tian Hai, her original figure wasn't that good. She only became famous after plastic surgery. As for Rio, I also like her a lot. She has a weak sexiness to her. I also watch her videos. I still have the newlyweds and campus beauty pageants on my computer, but she's going to retire this year. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl named Maggie didn't show any trace of shyness. Instead, she followed Jiang Hai and spoke with fervor and assurance. Jiang Hai was listening to her, and he was somewhat stunned. Maggie, I have always been curious. Don't mind me asking this. Are you Japanese women very open? This girl named Maggie was really good at talking, and she did not blush at all when talking about this topic. Taking advantage of the fact that she was a little thirsty in drinking, Jiang Hai also asked her. Because of the popularity of AI Wei's movies, many people from different countries would have the same idea. However, this idea was wrong. She then said, there are two extremes. Some women are very open, some are very conservative, but the men are very open. This is because even if a man married to a conservative woman, he will still go out and mess around. Conservative women don't mind, as long as they don't divorce and don't bring him home, it doesn't matter. For example, many of my friends in China put insurance in their husband's briefcase every day. If a man doesn't go out and mess around, he will be looked down upon by others. And if a wife has something to do back home, she will take the initiative to help her husband make an appointment. This is very common in China. This is very common. Wow, then you Japanese men are very happy. Hearing such an outrageous thing, Jiang Hai couldn't help but grin unconsciously. Recruiting by imperial decree, what a powerful nation. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Maggie shrugged and said indifferently, that's why I came to the United States. Clang. Just as Jiang Hai and the Japanese girl named Maggie were chatting happily, the door of their room was suddenly opened from the outside. A short blonde kid suddenly rushed in from the outside, holding a huge bottle of champagne in his hand. He shook it and shouted, "Wow, I'll treat you to a drink." As his voice fell, his fingers that were originally pressing on the mouth of the bottle instantly loosened, and then a column of champagne sprayed directly towards Jiang Hai, Moses, Adams, and the girls. Chapter 158. Who the F*** CK? Looking at the champagne column coming towards him, Jiang Hai shouted for the first time. However, the strong physical fitness brought by the Dragon Ball was no joke. His brain hadn't reacted yet, but his body had already reacted at the first moment. He immediately threw himself to the side, but he forgot that there were many people sitting next to him. All of a sudden, he threw himself on the girl named Maggie who was chatting with him just now. Some of the girls next to him were also thrown down by Jiang Hai, but there was no way to stop the champagne from falling from the sky. At the critical moment, Jiang Hai's foot stepped on the ground. In an instant, the originally huge sofa was abruptly turned over by Jiang Hai's foot. This time, not only Jiang Hai, but also the girls sitting on the sofa turned over with him. To be honest, these girls would rather be drenched by the champagne than be turned over like this. One must know that in order to create an atmosphere, the ground here was not covered with carpet, but with hard glass, in order to clearly see the activities on that floor. If they fell to the ground, although the glass would not be broken, it would definitely not feel good. So the moment they lost their center of gravity, these women screamed. Listening to this ear-piercing scream, Jiang Hai also reacted in an instant. He immediately supported himself with his palm and appeared under these women, using himself as a human cushion behind these women. Bang, 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 for consecutive sounds, Jiang Hai also felt that 4 heavy objects were pressing on his body. And these women opened their eyes when they found that they didn't feel any ice or pain. As soon as they saw that Jiang Hai was under them, these women were also stunned for a moment. In fact, not only were they stunned now, Jiang Hai was also stunned. As mentioned before, the clothes these women wore were very simple clothes. Although their lower bodies were wearing underwear, their upper bodies were not. With such a big movement, several women's tops were off. Thinking about that kind of cloth top, if one was not careful, it would easily rub to the side. In an instant, a few inexplicable spots appeared in front of Jiang Hai. This. Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai's pupils unconsciously dilated. At this time, these women also discovered that they seemed to be exposed, but among these 4 women, 2 were Latin American, and 1 was an American. They didn't seem to care very much. They even took the initiative to show their majestic existence to Jiang Hai. These women were not special workers, they were not professional workers. Their names were like models. If there were any comic conventions, game shows, car shows, and so on, they would also go to the stage or be a couple. Their main purpose was to promote themselves. Using their bodies to get to know more rich people, people in the entertainment circle, and even stars, this will be of great benefit to their future development. Maybe one day, when the hype is successful, they will no longer just rely on selling their bodies like now. It is very likely that they will also become artists and enter the upper class. And the simplest way for them to get to know these people is to rely on their bodies. It is precisely because of this that this nightclub has no restrictions on their entry and exit. Just like some gyms, if some beautiful women go to apply for a membership, there will always be a discount. They are also the signboards here. It can be said that both sides have a tacit understanding. Since they are sitting next to Jiang Hai, naturally, they also want to get close to Jiang Hai and show their capital. This is nothing. Only the Japanese girl was shocked. She stood up immediately and wanted to tidy up her clothes. But she forgot that at this time, the champagne rain was still falling outside. As soon as she stood up, the guy at the door noticed her. In an instant, the champagne rain sprayed over, making her wet. After feeling the impact, she screamed again and squatted down, but unfortunately, at this time, she had already become a drowned rat. Her hair, clothes, and makeup on her face were all messed up. Jiang Hai was a little speechless, but he had to admit that this girl was very beautiful after putting on heavy makeup. Even if it was messed up now, he could see that her foundation was still very good. Cough, now is not the time to think about this. Damn it, you dare to show off in front of me, you're courting death. Listening to the guy at the door still howling there, Jiang Hai's eyes flashed a fierce light. He was originally a pacifist, but since others came to find him, then he would not be polite. At this time, the guy's main firepower was aimed at the other 2 sofas. Moses Adams and the others had not had time to dodge. This was an opportunity. Jiang Hai jumped out from behind the sofa, then grabbed a fruit plate on the coffee table in front of him and threw it straight out like a disc. When the guy saw Jiang Hai flash out, he also wanted to spray Jiang Hai, but unfortunately, his reaction was much slower than Jiang Hai's. The fruit plate flew over and hit the guy's nose heavily before his champagne could turn around. There were 3 vital points on the human body. The first was the nose. After being hit, the person would feel dizzy, his nose would ache, and tears would flow. When the guy was hit by Jiang Hai's fruit plate, he immediately gave up the champagne in his hand and hugged his nose with both hands. Oh, who is it, my nose? While he was screaming, Jiang Hai had already flashed in front of him. Without saying a word, he kicked the guy directly in the chest. The guy didn't even have time to react. To be exact, he didn't even have time to wipe his tears before he was kicked out of the private room by Jiang Hai. He flew straight to the mirror in the corridor opposite the private room. With a loud bang, the huge golden mirror was also full of cracks from the guy's impact. Boss. At this time, the 2 men in black outside the door were also very surprised when they saw the guy flying out. They ran over immediately, wanting to see if the guy was okay. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked out of the room. Sir, don't move. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, one of the big men stood up in an instant and stood in front of Jiang Hai. His eyes stared at Jiang Hai. They all saw that their boss flew out of the room. Needless to say, he was beaten out, and now this man was very suspicious. My nose, my chest, damn it, who is it, you damn guy, you dare to hit me, teach him a lesson for me. At this time, the man who was just beaten out by Jiang Hai also recovered. He covered his nose with one hand and his chest with the other. He shouted angrily at Jiang Hai in front of him. Hearing his roar, Jiang Hai snorted coldly, then glanced at the 2 bodyguards. Judging from the size of these 2 guys and the murderous aura emitted from their bodies from time to time, these 2 should be soldiers and have seen blood. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to become this guy's bodyguards. However, compared with Bell and Jiang Hai's manner, they were still far behind, let alone him. Jiang Hai was confident that if these 2 guys dared to move, then he would tell them why the flowers were so red. But unfortunately, these 2 people didn't give Jiang Hai such an opportunity. One of them still stood in front of Jiang Hai, just on guard, but didn't intend to make a move. The other one squatted beside the man. Boss, we are your bodyguards, not your thugs. Listening to the man's words, the man squatting there said coldly. Hearing what this man said, the guy who was still rolling on the ground couldn't help but grit his teeth. These bodyguards are really disobedient. What's wrong? At this moment, a fat middle-aged white man ran in from the outside with a group of security guards. As soon as he saw the tense situation and the man lying on the ground, he took out the handkerchief in his pocket and wiped his sweat. It's this guy again. To be honest, this fat man really doesn't like him. Hey, George, this guy hit me, he hit me. Is there no law here? He dared to hit me. Seeing the fat man coming over, the man lying on the ground couldn't help but shout loudly. Our boss hit you? That's right, we can even kill you. You ran into our box for no reason and sprayed champagne on us. Don't talk about hitting you, even if we beat you to death, you can see if the police will sentence us. Hearing his roar, Moses Adams, who was in the room at this time, also walked out while wiping his wet hair and said angrily. In fact, no one would be happy if a guy suddenly sprayed champagne on them when they were still flirting with the girls in the room. Moses Adams is naturally such a person. I was treating you to a drink. I said it the first time I went in that I was treating you to a drink. You didn't thank me, and you even hit me. Do you have any shame? Hearing Moses Adams' words, the man lying on the ground slowly stood up with the help of his bodyguard. He grinned and pretended to be angry as he roared. I'm treating you to a drink, who needs your treat? Besides, your attitude of treating others to a drink is to directly spray champagne on them. If that's the case, then I was treating you to fruit just now. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai directly retorted without saying a word, then pointed to the broken fruit plate on the ground and said to the man with disdain. What did you say, you damn guy, George? He hit me. He actually hit me. How can your nightclub let such a guy in? I'm your VIP, do you understand? Hearing Jiang Hai directly return his words to him, the man was also a little angry. He knew that he couldn't get through to Jiang Hai, so he could only put pressure on the fat manager over there. F***ck your father, this is the manager, right? I also want to get an answer, why can this guy enter our box? Jiang Hai raised a middle finger to the crazy guy, then turned to the fat man and said coldly, you're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.